Hey everyone, I'm the storyteller, and I'm here to help you relax tonight. I know a lot of you use this video to fall asleep, so before we start, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, tell me in the comments, where are you from and what time is it there? Now get comfortable, take a deep breath, and just relax. The music box. There's something I need to tell you about my grandmother's music box, and even now, years later, my hands shake when I think about it. She kept it on her dresser for as long as I could remember. A beautiful antique piece made of dark mahogany with tiny golden dancers that spun when you opened the lid. The melody it played was hauntingly beautiful, some old waltz that seemed to come from another time, another world entirely. When I was 12, my grandmother passed away suddenly, and my mother inherited the music box along with everything else in that old Victorian house. I begged her to let me keep it in my room because it reminded me of the summers I'd spent at grandmother's house, listening to her stories while that melody played softly in the background. My mother hesitated at first, saying something about how grandmother had always been peculiar about that music box, never letting anyone touch it except to wind it once a week. But seeing how much I wanted it, she eventually agreed, making me promise to take good care of it. The first night it sat on my dresser, I couldn't sleep because I kept staring at it in the moonlight, remembering my grandmother's wrinkled hands winding the key every Sunday after church. Around midnight, I heard something that made my blood run cold. The music box was playing even though I hadn't wound it up. The melody drifted through my room, slow and distorted, like the mechanism was broken or running at the wrong speed. I sat up in bed, watching those little golden dancers spin in the darkness, their shadows casting strange shapes on my bedroom wall. Then I saw her, my grandmother, standing beside my dresser, her hand on the music box, smiling at me with eyes that weren't quite right. She looked exactly as I remembered her, wearing her favorite blue dress with the pearl buttons, but her skin was too pale, almost translucent in the moonlight. "Hello, sweetheart," she said, and her voice sounded like it was coming from very far away, echoing strangely in my small room. I wanted to scream, but no sound would come out as I watched her wind the music box with movements that were too smooth, too perfect. "I've missed our time together," she continued, sitting on the edge of my bed, and I could feel the mattress dip even though I knew she couldn't really be there. The music kept playing, that waltz getting slower and more distorted, and I noticed that the golden dancers were moving differently now, their graceful spins becoming jerky and wrong. My grandmother reached out to touch my face, and her hand was ice cold, like she'd been standing outside in winter for hours. "The music box was my connection," she whispered, leaning closer, and I could smell lavender and something else, something earthy and dark. "Every time someone winds it, I can visit, but I've been so lonely, dear one, so very lonely in that cold, dark place." I finally found my voice and asked her what she meant, though part of me already knew I didn't want to hear the answer. She smiled sadly and said, "I made a deal long ago, traded something precious for more time with my family, but the payment came due when I died. Now I'm trapped between worlds, and the music box is my only window back to the living, but it's not enough anymore." The room grew colder as she spoke, and I could see my breath forming clouds in the air while frost began creeping across my window. "I need someone to trade places with me," she said, her grip on my hand tightening. "Someone who loves me, someone who won't be missed too much." I tried to pull away, but her fingers were like iron bands around my wrist, and the music box played louder, the melody becoming something wild and frightening. "You were always my favorite grandchild," she continued, her face changing, becoming something horrible. "So sweet, so trusting, so perfect for what I need." That's when I noticed the golden dancers in the music box had stopped spinning and were instead facing me, their tiny painted faces twisted into screams. I managed to wrench my hand free and grab the music box, throwing it against the wall with all my strength, watching it shatter into 100 pieces. The moment it broke, my grandmother let out a wail that sounded like wind through a cemetery, and she began to fade, reaching for me desperately. "What have you done?" she shrieked, her form becoming transparent. "You don't know what you've condemned me to, you selfish child." Then she was gone, leaving only the broken pieces of the music box scattered across my floor and the lingering scent of lavender mixed with grave dirt. My parents found me the next morning, huddled in the corner of my room, surrounded by the debris, unable to explain why I'd destroyed the family heirloom. They thought I'd had a nightmare, maybe sleepwalked, but I knew the truth. My grandmother had tried to steal my life to escape whatever hell she'd bargained herself into. We threw away the pieces of the music box, but sometimes, late at night, I still hear that waltz playing somewhere in the walls of our house. And occasionally, just on the edge of my vision, I see golden dancers spinning in the shadows, and I know she's still trying to find a way back. But the worst part, the thing that keeps me awake at night, is what I found when we were cleaning out her house months later. Hidden in her attic were dozens of music boxes, all different sizes and styles, and photographs of children who had gone missing over the years. Each photo had a date on the back, and they corresponded exactly to when my grandmother had given music boxes as gifts to various young relatives and neighbors. I understood then that I wasn't her first attempt, just the first one who had fought back, who had broken free from whatever dark bargain she'd made. Now I warn everyone I meet, if someone gives you an antique music box, especially one with dancers, don't keep it, don't wind it, don't even touch it. Because some gifts come with a price too terrible to pay, and some grandmothers love their grandchildren for all the wrong reasons. The photographer. Let me tell you about Marcus Chin, a wedding photographer who discovered something terrifying in his pictures that changed his life forever. Marcus was talented, really talented, with an eye for capturing those perfect moments that couples would treasure for a lifetime, the stolen glances, the happy tears, the pure joy. He'd been photographing weddings for 10 years when he noticed something odd in the background of a photo from the Richardson wedding. Standing behind the bride's family was a woman in a tattered white dress, her face blurred as if she'd moved right when the shutter clicked. The strange thing was, Marcus didn't remember seeing her at the wedding, and she wasn't in any of the other photos from that angle. He figured it was just a guest who'd wandered into the shot, maybe someone from another wedding at the venue, so he edited her out and delivered the photos. But then she appeared again at the next wedding, same tattered dress, same blurred face, always standing somewhere in the background. This time she was near the altar during the ceremony, barely visible between the groomsmen, and Marcus was certain she hadn't been there when he took the shot. He started going through his old photos, thousands of them, and his blood ran cold when he found her in wedding after wedding, going back years. Sometimes she was barely visible, just a white shape in the distance, but other times she was frighteningly clear, standing among the guests like she belonged there. The most disturbing part was that in each photo, she seemed to be getting closer to the bride, slowly making her way through the crowds over the years. Marcus tried to convince himself it was pareidolia, his mind creating patterns where none existed, but the woman was too consistent, too deliberate in her appearances. He researched the venues, thinking maybe it was some sort of viral marketing campaign or an elaborate prank, but found nothing to explain the mysterious guest. Then came the Patel wedding, a lavish affair at a historic mansion, where Marcus saw her in person for the first time. She stood at the back of the ceremony in that same tattered dress, but when he looked through his camera lens, her face was crystal clear, hollow eyes, gray skin, lips moving as if speaking. He lowered the camera and she was gone, but when he looked through the viewfinder again, there she was, now standing directly behind the bride. Marcus's hands shook as he continued shooting, watching through his lens as the woman placed a translucent hand on the bride's shoulder. The bride shivered visibly, pulling her shawl tighter, but no one else seemed to notice the ghostly woman standing right there among them. After the ceremony, Marcus cornered the venue coordinator and asked about the woman in white, describing her in detail. The coordinator went pale and led him to a back office, pulling out an old photo album from the venue's history. She pointed to a picture from 1987, a bride named Jennifer Morrison who had died on her wedding day, killed in a car accident on the way to the reception. The woman in the photo looked exactly like the figure Marcus had been seeing, down to the style of the dress and the way she wore her hair. "She's been seen here before," the coordinator whispered, "but only by photographers, never by the naked eye, and never in the actual photos." Marcus felt sick as he realized what this meant. He'd been capturing a ghost on film for years, and she was appearing at weddings across the city, not just this venue. He went home and pulled up every photo where she appeared, creating a timeline, and noticed a horrifying pattern. In exactly 13 photos after she first appeared at a wedding, touching or standing directly next to the bride, something terrible would happen. The Richardson bride, diagnosed with terminal cancer 3 months after her wedding, dead within a year. The Taylor bride killed in a home invasion 6 months after saying, "I do." Every single bride who the ghost had touched in Marcus's photos had met with tragedy, exactly 13 photos after first contact. Marcus checked his recent uploads. The ghost had touched 12 brides in his photos, and the Patel bride would be number 13. He called the Patels frantically, trying to warn them, but how do you tell someone a ghost in their wedding photos has marked them for death? They thought he was having a breakdown, threatened to sue if he didn't deliver their photos, demanded he stop calling with his sick pranks. 3 weeks later, the news reported that Priya Patel had died in a freak accident, falling down the stairs in her own home, her neck broken. Marcus stopped photographing weddings after that, couldn't bear to look through a lens knowing what he might see, knowing he was documenting future tragedies. But the ghost didn't stop appearing. Other photographers started seeing her, posting online about the strange woman in white who showed up in their wedding photos. A photography forum tracked her appearances, mapping her movements across the country, always at weddings, always moving closer to the brides. Some photographers tried to warn couples, but most were dismissed as cranks or attention seekers trying to drum up business with ghost stories. Marcus became obsessed with finding out who Jennifer Morrison really was, why she was haunting weddings, what she wanted with these brides. He discovered that she'd been engaged 5 times before her death, and each previous fiancé had died under mysterious circumstances before the wedding. The locals in her hometown whispered that she'd made a deal with something dark, trading the lives of her lovers for eternal beauty and youth. But the deal went wrong on her final wedding day. The car accident that killed her happened at exactly 11:11, and witnesses said her white dress turned red with blood. Now she seemed doomed to attend weddings forever, marking brides for death, perhaps jealous of the happiness she never got to experience. Marcus found one more horrible detail in his research. Jennifer Morrison's body had never been found at the accident scene, only blood and torn pieces of her dress. He realized with growing horror that she wasn't just appearing in photos. She was growing more solid, more real, feeding off the life force of the brides she marked. The last email Marcus sent to the photography forum contained a single photo of him at his own wedding, years before he became a photographer. In the background, barely visible but unmistakably there, stood a woman in a tattered white dress, her hand reaching toward his own bride. His wife had died of a sudden illness just 3 years after their wedding, and Marcus had thrown himself into photography to cope with the grief. He understood now that Jennifer Morrison hadn't chosen him randomly. He'd been part of her plan all along, documenting her victims, spreading her curse. The email ended with a warning: don't photograph weddings. Don't look for her in your pictures. And whatever you do, don't let her touch the ones you love. Marcus disappeared after sending that email, and his camera was found by a river, the memory card corrupted except for one image. It showed a wedding in progress, but all the guests had hollow eyes and gray skin, and in the center stood Jennifer Morrison, no longer blurred, no longer transparent. She was smiling, wearing a fresh white dress, standing next to a groom whose face was turned away from the camera. But those who knew Marcus recognized his watch, his ring, his nervous habit of standing with one foot slightly forward. Sometimes photographers at weddings still report seeing them, a couple in white, always in the background, always moving closer to the living bride and groom. And if you look carefully at your own wedding photos, really carefully, you might see them too, waiting patiently for their next victims to join their eternal celebration. Because Jennifer Morrison finally got her perfect wedding, and now she needs guests to fill the empty seats, one marked bride at a time. The boarding school. The Blackwood Academy for Exceptional Young Ladies had stood on that misty hillside since 1889, and I wish to God I'd never set foot inside its gates. My parents sent me there when I was 14, convinced that its prestigious reputation would open doors for my future, but they had no idea what really went on behind those towering stone walls. The first thing I noticed was how quiet the other girls were, not the normal quiet of strict discipline, but something deeper, like they were afraid to make any sound at all. My roommate Sarah barely spoke above a whisper, and when I asked her why everyone was so subdued, she just looked at me with hollow eyes and said, "You'll learn." The teachers were strange too, especially Miss Whitmore, the headmistress, whose smile never quite reached her eyes and who seemed to glide rather than walk through the halls. She welcomed me with cold hands and colder words. "We shape exceptional young ladies here, Rebecca. By the time you graduate, you'll be perfect." The classes were normal enough during the day: literature, mathematics, etiquette, but it was what happened after dark that made my skin crawl. Every night at exactly 11:47, I would hear footsteps in the hallway, slow and measured, stopping at each door for precisely 13 seconds. Sarah would pull her covers over her head when the footsteps approached, trembling like a leaf, but she refused to tell me what she was afraid of. On my 7th night, I pretended to sleep but kept my eyes cracked open, watching the strip of light under our door. The footsteps stopped outside, and I saw shadows moving in the light, not one pair of feet, but dozens, all standing perfectly still. Then came the whispers, so soft I could barely hear them, speaking in a language that sounded ancient and wrong, making my teeth ache just listening. The doorknob turned slowly, even though I knew Sarah had locked it, and the door swung open silently to reveal Miss Whitmore and 6 other teachers. Their eyes were completely black, no whites at all, and they moved in perfect synchronization as they entered our room. Sarah lay rigid in her bed, eyes wide open but unseeing, as Miss Whitmore bent over her and began to whisper those terrible words. I watched in frozen horror as something like smoke rose from Sarah's mouth, twisting in the air before being inhaled by the headmistress. When they turned to my bed, I forced myself to remain still, to breathe evenly, to play dead as those black eyes studied me. "This one's not ready yet," Miss Whitmore said in a voice like grinding stone, "but soon, very soon, she'll be perfect like the others." They left as silently as they'd come, and Sarah didn't move or speak for the rest of the night, just stared at the ceiling with empty eyes. The next morning she was different. Her movements were too precise, her smile too perfect, her voice completely flat when she spoke. I started watching the other girls more carefully and realized they were all the same, beautiful, graceful, exceptional, but completely hollow inside. During library time, I found old yearbooks hidden in the restricted section and discovered something that made my stomach turn. The faces in the photos from 1889 looked exactly like some of my current classmates, not similar but identical, down to every freckle and beauty mark. Page after page showed the same girls in different decades, wearing different styles but never aging, never changing, always with those perfect empty smiles. I tried to call my parents, but the phones wouldn't connect to outside numbers, and my letters home were returned unopened. When I confronted Sarah with the yearbook evidence, she tilted her head at an unnatural angle and said, "We've always been here. We'll always be here. Perfect." That night, I stayed awake, barricading the door with furniture, but at 11:47 the barricade simply wasn't there anymore, like reality had been edited. Miss Whitmore entered with her entourage, and this time I couldn't pretend to sleep because my body wouldn't obey my commands. "You've been snooping, Rebecca," she said, running one cold finger down my cheek, "but curiosity is just another flaw we'll remove." She explained in that grinding voice that Blackwood Academy had made a bargain long ago, eternal funding, eternal prestige in exchange for providing vessels. "We take what makes you imperfect, your fears, your dreams, your messy human souls, and leave behind the ideal young lady, forever preserved, forever perfect." The teachers began their chanting, and I felt something inside me responding, trying to claw its way out of my chest. But then I remembered something my grandmother had told me, a silly rhyme she taught me for protection. "Silver and salt, iron and ash, guard my soul from those who'd snatch." I whispered it over and over as they chanted, and suddenly Miss Whitmore recoiled, her perfect face cracking like porcelain. "Impossible," she hissed. "No one remembers the old protections anymore, no one teaches them to their children." The other teachers backed away as I continued the rhyme, their synchronized movements faltering, and I saw my chance. I ran from the room, down the endless corridors, past classrooms where girls sat frozen at desks, past the dining hall where they held empty forks to their lips. Behind me, I could hear Miss Whitmore shrieking commands, and the entire building seemed to shake with her rage. The front doors were sealed, but I remembered the old coal chute in the basement that Sarah had mentioned once in her sleep. I found it behind the boiler room, barely big enough to squeeze through, and emerged into the cold night air covered in coal dust and trembling. I ran down the hillside, not stopping until I reached the town, where I burst into the police station babbling about the school. But when they drove me back up the hill the next morning, Blackwood Academy was gone, just empty land where it had stood for over a century. The officers thought I was having a breakdown, maybe drugs, and called my parents to come get their troubled daughter. No one believed me about the school, but I did research and found other girls over the years who remembered Blackwood Academy, who had escaped or been rejected. We formed a support group online, sharing our stories, trying to warn others about schools that appear and disappear, always looking for perfect vessels. Sometimes I still wake up at 11:47, expecting to hear those footsteps, and I wonder what happened to Sarah and all the others trapped inside. Are they still there, in whatever dimension the school exists in now, perfect and empty for eternity? I keep my grandmother's rhyme written on cards in every room, teach it to every child I meet, because the academies are still out there. They have different names now, Ravencrest, Thornfield, Ashwood, but the pattern is always the same. Exceptional young ladies go in, hollow dolls come out. If your daughter gets accepted to a prestigious boarding school you've never heard of, one with a campus you can't quite locate on a map, don't send her. And if you must send her, teach her the old protections first, because once they take what makes her human, no amount of tuition refunds will bring her back. The perfect young ladies are still out there, attending their eternal classes, and they're always recruiting new students to join their timeless, soulless ranks. The basement apartment. When I first saw the listing for the basement apartment on Craigslist, I couldn't believe the price, $400 a month in a city where closets rented for twice that. The landlord, Mr. Petrov, showed me around with nervous energy, constantly wiping his palms on his pants and avoiding eye contact as he explained the quirks of the place. Sometimes pipes make noise, he said in his thick accent, and electricity it flickers but is normal for old building. You are okay with this? I was a broke graduate student. I was okay with anything that had 4 walls and a roof, so I signed the lease that day and moved in immediately. The apartment was actually nice, spacious for a basement, with high ceilings and these odd, archway door frames that made it feel almost church-like. But from the first night, I knew something was off about the place, something that went beyond old pipes and faulty wiring. I would wake up at strange hours feeling like I was being watched, and the air always felt heavy, pressing down on me like a physical weight. My belongings started disappearing, small things at first, a sock here, a pencil there, but then larger items like my favorite coffee mug and a textbook I needed for class. I blamed it on stress and disorganization until I found them all piled neatly in the corner of my closet, arranged in a perfect circle around a photo of myself I didn't remember taking. The photo showed me sleeping in my bed, taken from directly above, like someone had been standing on the ceiling looking down. That's when I installed security cameras, hidden ones that my ex-boyfriend who worked in tech helped me set up without telling the landlord. For 3 nights, the footage showed nothing unusual, just me going about my routine, studying, sleeping, living my normal life. But on the 4th night, the cameras captured something that made me pack my bags and stay with friends for a week. At 3:33 a.m., a section of my living room wall simply opened up, like a hidden door I'd never noticed, even though I'd examined every inch of that place. A figure crawled out, humanoid but wrong, with limbs that bent in too many places and skin that looked like wet leather under the infrared light. It moved through my apartment on all 4s, sniffing at my belongings, rubbing its face against my furniture like an animal marking territory. When it reached my bedroom, it stood up, towering at least 7 feet tall, and watched me sleep for exactly 1 hour before retreating to the wall. I showed the footage to my ex, begging him to believe me, but the file had corrupted, showing only static where the creature should have been. He thought I was having a breakdown, suggested therapy, but I knew what I'd seen, and I needed answers about what was living in my walls. I confronted Mr. Petrov with questions about the apartment's history, and his face went white as he begged me not to dig into the past. Just pay rent, be quiet at night, don't make trouble, he whispered, looking around as if the walls had ears, his arrangement that works for everyone. But I couldn't let it go, so I researched the building's history at the library, finding newspaper clippings that made my skin crawl. In 1973, a family of 4 had lived in my apartment, parents and 2 children, until they simply vanished one night, leaving everything behind. In 1981, a young couple disappeared the same way, and in 1995, a single mother and her baby were gone without a trace. Every tenant who'd lived in that basement for more than a year had vanished, and the police had never found bodies or evidence of foul play. I dug deeper and found records from the 1920s, when the building was constructed on the site of an old psychiatric hospital that had burned down. The hospital's basement had survived the fire intact, and they'd simply built the new building on top of it, incorporating the old foundation. Patient records from the hospital mentioned underground tunnels used for experimental treatments that were sealed after several patients escaped into them and were never found. Armed with this knowledge, I went back to my apartment during daylight hours, determined to find where that hidden door led. I examined the wall where I'd seen it open, running my hands over every surface until I felt a slight depression, almost imperceptible unless you knew to look. When I pressed it, a section of wall swung inward, revealing a narrow passage that reeked of mold and something worse, something organic and rotting. I should have left then, should have called the police, but curiosity won out, and I entered the passage with my phone flashlight illuminating the way. The tunnel was older than my apartment, with stone walls that wept moisture and a floor covered in what looked like decades of accumulated filth. I followed it for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, passing other passages that branched off into darkness, trying to memorize my path back. Finally, I reached a larger chamber, and what I saw there made me understand why tenants kept disappearing, why Mr. Petrov was so nervous, why the rent was so cheap. The room was filled with makeshift nests built from shredded clothing, furniture stuffing, and what looked horribly like human hair, all woven together. In the center sat 3 of those creatures, feeding on something I didn't want to identify, their wet leather skin glistening in my phone light. But the worst part was the walls, covered in photographs spanning decades, all showing sleeping tenants, including dozens of me from angles I couldn't explain. One of the creatures looked up, its face almost human except for the eyes that reflected my light like a nocturnal animal's, and it smiled. "New friend stays longer this time," it said in a voice like grinding glass. "Others left too quick, but you're curious, you're special." I backed away slowly as they all turned to watch me, their movements synchronized like they shared one mind, one hunger. "We make deal with one above," another creature spoke. "He brings friends to play, we stay hidden, we only take some, not all." I ran then, sprinting through the tunnels as their laughter echoed behind me, wrong turns leading to dead ends, panic making me careless. When I finally burst through the hidden door into my apartment, Mr. Petrov was waiting, wringing his hands with tears in his eyes. "You shouldn't have looked," he said. "Now they know you know, and the arrangement, it changes. They'll want to keep you now." He explained through sobs that his grandmother had made the deal decades ago, cheap rent for tenants who wouldn't be missed, in exchange for the creatures staying hidden. Most people felt the wrongness and left quickly, but occasionally someone stayed too long, got too comfortable, and the creatures would claim them. "But you found them," he wept. "You went into their home, and now they think you want to join them, be part of their family forever." I packed what I could carry and left that night, but it didn't matter. I started seeing them everywhere, in reflections, in shadows, always watching. My new apartment's walls sometimes ripple like water, and I find photographs of myself sleeping no matter how many locks I install or hotels I move to. Friends say I'm paranoid when I check their walls for hidden doors, when I refuse to live in basements or old buildings, when I panic at 3:33 a.m. But I know they're still looking for me, those things that live between walls, and one night I'll wake up to find them crawling out of whatever hidden space they found. Mr. Petrov still texts me sometimes, begging me to come back, saying the creatures are getting restless without their special friend, threatening to come above ground. I've considered it, going back, letting them take me if it means they'll stay hidden and not hunt for other victims in other walls. Because now I know the truth. In every old building, in every basement, in every space between walls, they're waiting, building nests, taking photographs. And if you ever find a basement apartment that's too cheap to be true, with high ceilings and archway door frames that feel almost church-like, don't rent it. Or if you do, don't stay long, don't get curious, and whatever you do, don't go looking for what lives in the walls. Because once they know you know, once they decide you're special, they'll never stop following you, never stop watching, never stop waiting for you to come home. The last story. I need to tell you about the last story, the one that connects all the others, the truth I discovered that made everything horrifyingly clear. My name is Dr. Elizabeth Crane, and I was a folklorist studying urban legends and their psychological impact on communities. For 15 years, I collected stories like the ones you've just read, dismissing them as modern mythology, collective fears made manifest through narrative. But then I started noticing patterns in the stories that couldn't be explained by simple cultural transmission or shared anxieties. The same entities appeared across continents, described in identical detail by people who'd never met, never shared their experiences online, never even left their hometowns. Music boxes that played the same waltz, photographers capturing the same ghost, boarding schools with the same missing students, creatures in walls with the same wet leather skin. I mapped out hundreds of these stories, creating a database of supernatural encounters, and what I found changed everything I believed about reality. The incidents weren't random, they followed ley lines, occurred at specific coordinates that formed geometric patterns when connected on a global map. Each story, each haunting, each creature sighting was a node in a vast network, and at the center of every pattern was the same coordinate, 43.7384 degrees north, 7.4246 degrees east. Those coordinates led me to a small town in the Maritime Alps. where I found a monastery that had been abandoned since the 13th century. The locals wouldn't speak about it directly, just crossed themselves and muttered about the Watchers and the record keepers who once lived there. I hired a guide, a young man who needed the money badly enough to overcome his fear, and we climbed to the monastery ruins. What I found there broke my understanding of the world and explained why these stories keep happening, keep spreading, keep finding new victims. The monastery's library was intact, protected by something that made my skin crawl, a presence that watched us but didn't interfere like we were supposed to be there. The books were written in dozens of languages, some I recognized, others that predated human civilization, all telling the same story. Long ago, things from outside our reality noticed Earth, drawn by human consciousness like moths to a flame, hungry for experiences they couldn't have in their dimension. But they couldn't enter our world fully without invitation, without cracks in reality made by belief, fear, and acknowledgement of their existence. So they made a bargain with a group of monks who thought they were contacting angels, trading knowledge for access, wisdom for doorways. The monks became the first record keepers, documenting every encounter, every sighting, every story, because each telling made the creatures stronger, more real. They thought they were warning people, but every story shared was actually an invitation, a crack in reality that something could slip through. The music boxes, the photographers, the schools, the basement dwellers, they were all scouts, testing our world, seeing how much they could manifest, how many they could take. And every person who heard their stories and believed, even for a moment, made their foothold in our reality stronger, more permanent. I found my own research in those ancient books. Every story I'd collected already documented centuries before, because time works differently for them. They exist in all moments simultaneously, and every story told about them echoes backward and forward through time, creating loops of causality. The worst revelation was finding a book that showed the future, filled with stories that hadn't happened yet but would, because we keep telling them, keep spreading them, keep believing. I saw the ending too, the final chapter, when enough people believe, when enough stories are told, when the barrier between worlds becomes too thin to hold. The sky will crack like glass, reality will fold in on itself, and those things waiting outside will pour through in numbers beyond counting. But here's the truly horrible part: by reading this, by believing even a fraction of what I've told you, you've become part of the pattern. You'll see them now, in the corners of your vision, in the shadows of your home, in the faces of strangers who smile too wide. You'll hear the music boxes playing in empty rooms, see photographers at events who aren't quite human, notice schools that shouldn't exist. And you'll tell others, because the stories demand to be shared, spreading like a virus of consciousness that weakens reality with every telling. I tried to burn the monastery, to destroy the records, but the fire wouldn't touch the books, and the presence that watched just laughed. You cannot stop what has already begun and ended and is always happening, it said in a voice made of whispers. You are the story now. I left that place changed, carrying knowledge that burns in my mind like acid, seeing the connections everywhere, the pattern underlying everything. Every ghost story you've ever heard, every urban legend, every creepypasta, they're all true, all connected, all preparing the way for something larger. The music box collector who gathers souls, the wedding photographer documenting doomed brides, the schools molding empty vessels, the creatures inhabiting spaces between, they're all servants of the same hunger. And now you know too, which means you're part of it, another node in the network, another crack in reality's wall. You'll try to forget what you've read, rationalize it as fiction, but late at night, when you hear impossible sounds or see impossible things, you'll remember. You'll remember and you'll believe just for a moment, and that moment is all they need to push a little further into our world. The patterns are accelerating, the stories spreading faster through internet forums and social media, each share, each like, each comment adding power to their manifestation. Soon, the monastery records say, the final story will be told, the one that completes the pattern and opens the door permanently. I don't know which story it will be or who will tell it, but I know it's coming, and we're all helping to write it with every nightmare we share. So remember this when you hear footsteps in your walls, when antique stores call to you, when photographers capture things that shouldn't be there. When schools promise perfection, when basement apartments seem too good to be true, remember that every story started with someone like you. Someone curious, someone skeptical, someone who thought they were safe because they didn't believe until the moment they did. The monks in that monastery made one final entry before they vanished, a warning written in blood on the last page of the last book. We thought we were recording history, but we were writing the future. Every story told brings the end closer. Stop telling the stories. But we can't stop, can we? Because the stories are already inside us, already part of us, already spreading through the collective unconscious of humanity. You'll share this, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually, because the knowledge is too heavy to carry alone. And whoever you tell will tell others, and the pattern will grow stronger, the cracks wider, until there's no barrier left between their world and ours. I see them everywhere now, in crowded streets, empty buildings, familiar faces that aren't quite right, all waiting for the final invitation. Sometimes I wonder if I'm still in that monastery, if I ever left, if this is just another story in their books, being written as I live it. But it doesn't matter whether this is real or not, because your belief makes it real, your fear gives it power, your sharing completes the circuit. The last story has already begun, is always beginning, will begin soon, and we're all characters in it, playing our parts perfectly. Welcome to the pattern, dear reader. Welcome to the story that never ends, only transforms, only spreads, only grows stronger with each telling. And remember, when you see them, when they notice you noticing them, when they smile their too wide smiles and beckon with their wrong-jointed fingers, remember that you invited them in the moment you chose to believe, and they've been waiting so very, very long to meet you properly. The record keepers thank you for your participation in the greatest story ever told, the one where humanity writes its own ending, one nightmare at a time. Sleep well tonight if you can, knowing that every creak of your house, every shadow that moves wrong, every whisper in the darkness might be them. Or it might just be your imagination, fed by the stories you've read, the patterns you've recognized, the truth you now carry like a disease. Either way, the ending is the same. We tell the stories become real, reality becomes the story, and the watchers finally come home. This is Dr. Elizabeth Crane, signing off from wherever I am now, whenever this is, hoping someone finds these words and understands. But also hoping they don't, because understanding is the key that opens the final door, and God help us all when that door finally opens. The stories are true. The patterns are real. The ending is written. And you, dear reader, just became part of it all. Welcome to the last story. You can never leave. The night shift at the old hospital. This happened to me in 2019 when I was 22 years old. I had just graduated from nursing school and got my first job at St. Mary's Hospital. It was an old building that had been around since the 1950s. The hospital had this reputation among the staff. People said strange things happened there at night. But I didn't believe in any of that stuff back then. I was assigned to work the night shift on the 4th floor. The 4th floor was where they kept the long-term patients. Most of them were elderly people who couldn't take care of themselves anymore. My supervisor, Linda, was showing me around on my first night. She was a woman in her 50s who had worked there for over 20 years. Linda walked me through the halls and showed me each room. The hallway was long and dimly lit with old fluorescent lights. Some of the lights flickered on and off throughout the night. The floor had this strange smell to it. It wasn't just the usual hospital smell of disinfectant. There was something else mixed in with it. Something that reminded me of old flowers and dust. Linda stopped at room 413 and pointed to the door. "This room has been empty for 3 months," she said quietly. "But sometimes the call light goes on by itself." She looked at me with serious eyes. "If that happens, just turn it off and don't go inside." I thought she was just trying to scare the new girl. So I laughed it off and said I wasn't afraid of anything. Linda didn't smile back at me. "I'm serious," she said. "Just don't go in that room." The first few hours of my shift went by normally. I checked on patients, gave them their medications, and helped them to the bathroom. Most of them were sleeping peacefully. Around 2 a.m., I was sitting at the nurse's station doing paperwork. The hospital was quiet except for the usual sounds. Machines beeping, air conditioning humming, and the occasional cough from a patient's room. That's when I heard it for the first time. A soft crying sound coming from down the hall. It sounded like an old woman sobbing quietly. I looked up from my paperwork and listened carefully. The crying seemed to be coming from the direction of room 413. I got up from my chair and walked slowly down the hall. My footsteps echoed on the hard floor. As I got closer to room 413, the crying got louder. I could hear it clearly now. It was definitely an old woman crying. She sounded so sad and lonely. I reached for the door handle of room 413, but then I remembered what Linda had told me. I stood there for a moment, listening to the crying. My heart was beating faster than normal. I decided to check the other rooms first to make sure it wasn't coming from somewhere else. I went to room 411 and peeked inside. Mrs. Johnson was sleeping soundly. I checked room 415 on the other side. Mr. Martinez was also fast asleep. The crying was definitely coming from room 413. I walked back to the door and put my ear against it. The crying was so clear now. I could hear every sob and every breath. It sounded like the woman was right on the other side of the door. I knew I should listen to Linda's warning, but I couldn't just ignore someone who sounded so upset. What if there really was someone in there who needed help? I slowly turned the door handle. The door opened with a soft creak. The room was completely dark inside. I reached for the light switch and flipped it on. The room was empty. There was no one inside. Just an old hospital bed with clean white sheets, a small table next to the bed, and an empty chair by the window. But I could still hear the crying. It was coming from inside the room now. The sound seemed to be moving around the room. First it was near the bed. Then it moved toward the window. Then back to the corner near the bathroom. I stood in the doorway, frozen with fear. The crying got louder and more desperate. It sounded like the woman was in terrible pain. Not physical pain, but emotional pain. Like she had lost someone very important to her. I wanted to run back to the nurse's station, but my feet wouldn't move. I just stood there listening to this invisible woman cry. Then suddenly the crying stopped. The room became completely silent. I could hear my own heart pounding in my chest. I was about to turn around and leave when I heard a voice. A soft, elderly woman's voice spoke from somewhere in the room. "Please don't leave me alone again." The voice sounded so real, so close to me, like someone was standing right next to me. But there was no one there. I finally found the strength to move my feet. I backed out of the room slowly. I didn't want to turn my back on whatever was in there. I kept my eyes on the empty room as I stepped backward. Once I was in the hallway, I quickly closed the door. My hands were shaking as I walked back to the nurse's station. I sat down in my chair and tried to calm myself down. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe I had imagined the whole thing. But deep down, I knew what I had heard was real. I tried to focus on my paperwork for the rest of the night, but I kept glancing down the hall toward room 413. Around 4 a.m., I heard the call light bell ring. I looked at the board to see which room it was coming from. Room 413. The light was blinking red on the board. I remembered Linda's warning about just turning it off. But I also remembered the sad voice asking me not to leave her alone. I got up from my chair and walked down the hall again. The call light above the door was flashing. I opened the door and reached for the light switch inside the room. As soon as I touched the switch, the call light went off. The room was dark and quiet again. I was about to close the door when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around quickly. Linda was walking down the hall toward me. "I told you not to go in that room," she said. Her voice wasn't angry, just sad. "I'm sorry," I said. I heard crying and then the call light went on. Linda nodded her head slowly. "Her name was Margaret," she said quietly. "She died in that room 3 months ago. She was 93 years old and had no family. She spent her last 2 weeks in that room completely alone. No visitors, no phone calls, nothing." Linda looked at the closed door of room 413. The nurses were her only company. She used to cry at night because she was so lonely. She would press the call button just to have someone to talk to, even if it was only for a few minutes. I felt a chill run down my spine. So the crying I heard, I started to say, was probably Margaret, Linda finished. She doesn't understand that she's gone. She's still waiting for someone to come keep her company. Linda put her hand on my shoulder. "That's why I told you not to go in there. Some of the other nurses have heard her too, but it just makes them sad. There's nothing we can do to help her now." We walked back to the nurse's station together. Linda sat down next to me. "The hospital administration doesn't want us talking about this stuff," she said. "They think it will scare away new employees. But I thought you should know the truth. Margaret was a sweet old lady. She never caused any trouble when she was alive. She just wanted someone to care about her. I worked the rest of my shift without any more incidents. But I couldn't stop thinking about Margaret. I imagined her lying in that bed for 2 weeks with no one to visit her. How lonely and scared she must have been. When my shift ended at 7 a.m., I went home and tried to sleep. But I kept hearing that voice asking me not to leave her alone. The next night I came back to work. I was hoping that maybe the previous night had been my imagination. But around 2:30 a.m. I heard the crying again. This time I didn't hesitate. I walked straight to room 413 and opened the door. "Margaret." I called softly into the dark room. The crying stopped immediately. "Margaret, is that you?" I asked. I heard a soft sigh from somewhere near the bed. "Yes, dear," came the elderly woman's voice. "I've been waiting for you to come back." I turned on the light, but I still couldn't see anyone. "I'm here now," I said to the empty room. "You don't have to be alone anymore." I pulled the chair closer to the bed and sat down. "Would you like me to stay with you for a while?" I asked. "Oh yes, please," Margaret's voice said. "I get so frightened when it's dark and quiet." I spent the next hour sitting in that chair, talking to Margaret about her life. She told me about her husband who had died 10 years earlier. She told me about her job as a school teacher. She told me about the students she had loved over the years. She spoke in such detail that I knew these memories were real. This wasn't just my imagination playing tricks on me. Margaret was really there with me even though I couldn't see her. When I finally had to leave to check on my other patients, I promised I would come back. "Don't worry, Margaret," I said. "I won't leave you alone all night." "Thank you, dear," she said. "You're such a kind girl." From that night on, I made it a routine. Every night during my shift, I would spend time with Margaret. Sometimes I would read to her from magazines I brought from home. Sometimes I would just sit and listen to her stories. She never appeared to me visually, but her voice was always clear and real. The other nurses started to notice that room 413's call light stopped going off randomly. Linda asked me about it one night. "Have you been going in there again?" she asked. I nodded and told her about my conversations with Margaret. Linda smiled for the first time since I had met her. "You know what?" she said. "Margaret always did like the young nurses best." She said we reminded her of her students. I continued working the night shift for 6 more months. Margaret and I became close friends during that time. She would tell me about her dreams and her fears. I would tell her about my life and my plans for the future. She gave me advice about relationships and career choices. It was like having a grandmother who cared about me. Then one night in December, everything changed. I went to room 413 as usual around 2 a.m. "Margaret." I called as I opened the door, but there was no answer. I sat in the chair and waited. "Margaret, are you here?" I asked again. Still nothing. The room felt different somehow. It felt peaceful and calm, not sad and lonely like it had before. I sat there for an hour, but Margaret never spoke to me. I came back the next night and the night after that, but Margaret was gone. I never heard her voice again. Linda told me later that she thought Margaret had finally found peace. "Maybe she just needed someone to care about her," Linda said. Maybe that was all she was waiting for. I transferred to the day shift a few weeks later, but I still think about Margaret often. Sometimes I walk by room 413 during my breaks. It's been occupied by other patients since then, but I always remember the lonely old woman who just wanted someone to sit with her in the dark. I learned something important from Margaret, that sometimes the scariest things aren't trying to hurt us. Sometimes they just need our compassion and understanding. And sometimes being brave means staying when others would run away. The thing in the basement. This happened to me when I was 16 years old, back in 2020. My family had just moved into this old house on Maple Street. It was a 2-story house that was built in the 1940s. The previous owners had lived there for over 30 years before moving to Florida. My mom was excited about having a basement for storage. Our old apartment didn't have any extra space, but I didn't like the basement from the first day we moved in. There was something about it that made me feel uncomfortable. The basement was partially finished. One half had wood paneling on the walls and carpet on the floor. That's where my dad set up his workshop. The other half was just concrete walls and a dirt floor. That's where we kept the washer and dryer. There was a single light bulb hanging from the ceiling in each section. But even with the lights on, there were dark corners everywhere. The basement had this musty smell that never went away. My mom tried using air fresheners and dehumidifiers, but the smell always came back. It reminded me of wet dirt and something else I couldn't identify. Something that made my stomach feel queasy. For the first few weeks, everything seemed normal. I would go down to the basement to do laundry or get something from storage. I didn't like being down there alone, but I managed. I always made sure to turn on both lights before going down the stairs. and I always ran back up as soon as I finished what I needed to do. My parents thought I was being silly. "It's just a basement," my dad would say. "There's nothing down there that can hurt you." But I knew something was wrong with that place. I could feel it watching me whenever I went down there. The first strange thing happened on a Saturday morning in October. I went down to move a load of laundry from the washer to the dryer. I turned on the lights and walked over to the laundry area. Everything seemed normal at first, but as I was transferring the wet clothes, I heard a sound. It was like something heavy being dragged across the dirt floor. The sound was coming from the unfinished section of the basement. I stopped what I was doing and listened carefully. The dragging sound continued for about 10 seconds. Then it stopped completely. I called out, "Hello? Is someone down here?" But there was no answer. I thought maybe it was just the house settling. Old houses make weird noises sometimes. I finished moving the laundry and hurried back upstairs. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been watching me. A few days later, I had to go down to get my winter coat from a storage box. It was getting cold outside and I needed something warm to wear to school. I turned on the lights and walked over to where we kept the seasonal clothes. The storage boxes were stacked against the wall in the finished section. I found the box with my winter clothes and started looking through it. That's when I heard the sound again. The same dragging noise from the dirt floor area. But this time it was louder, and it was moving in a pattern, like something was pacing back and forth. I froze and listened to the sound. It would drag for a few feet, then stop. Then drag in the other direction, then stop again. Like something was walking but couldn't lift its feet properly. I grabbed my coat and headed for the stairs. But as I reached the bottom step, the sound stopped. I turned around to look back at the basement. In the dim light, I thought I saw something move in the shadows. Something large and dark that quickly disappeared behind the furnace. I ran up the stairs as fast as I could. My heart was pounding and my hands were shaking. I slammed the basement door behind me and leaned against it. My mom was in the kitchen making lunch. "What's wrong?" she asked when she saw my face. "I think there's something in the basement," I said. My mom looked at me with concern. "What kind of something?" she asked. I told her about the dragging sounds and the shadow I had seen. She listened patiently, but I could tell she didn't really believe me. "Maybe it was just a mouse or a rat," she suggested. Old houses always have rodents. But I knew what I had heard was much bigger than a mouse. That night at dinner, I told my dad about it too. He was even less convinced than my mom. "Houses make all kinds of noises," he said. "The pipes, the furnace, the wood expanding and contracting. There's a logical explanation for everything you heard." But I could see the concern in my mom's eyes. She might not have believed me completely, but she was worried. The next day after school, my mom asked me to go get something from the basement. "I need you to bring up the Halloween decorations," she said. "They're in a box labeled October near the back wall." I really didn't want to go down there alone. But I couldn't tell my mom I was too scared. I was 16 years old and I didn't want to seem like a little kid. So I took a deep breath and opened the basement door. I turned on both lights before going down the stairs. The Halloween decorations were stored in the unfinished section, which meant I had to walk across the dirt floor. I moved as quickly as possible, trying not to look at the dark corners. I found the box with the decorations and picked it up. It was heavier than I expected and I had to use both hands to carry it. As I was walking back toward the stairs, I heard a new sound. It wasn't the dragging noise from before. This was more like breathing. Heavy, raspy breathing coming from somewhere behind me. I walked faster, but the breathing seemed to follow me. When I reached the stairs, I turned around to look back. In the corner where I had gotten the box, I saw two glowing eyes. They were about 6 feet off the ground and glowing yellow-green, like the eyes of an animal caught in headlights. But these eyes were much larger than any animal I had ever seen. I dropped the box and ran up the stairs. The Halloween decorations scattered all over the basement floor. I slammed the door and locked it. My mom came running when she heard the noise. "What happened?" she asked. I was breathing so hard I could barely speak. "There's something down there," I gasped. "Something with glowing eyes." My mom looked skeptical, but she could see how scared I was. "Okay," she said. "Let's wait for your father to get home. He can go down and check it out." When my dad got home from work, I told him what had happened. He sighed and shook his head. "All right," he said. "Let's go take a look." He grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer. "Come with me," he said. "I'll show you there's nothing to be afraid of." I really didn't want to go back down there. But I couldn't let my dad go alone if there really was something dangerous. We opened the basement door and turned on the lights. My dad went down first with the flashlight. I stayed close behind him on the stairs. The Halloween decorations were still scattered on the floor where I had dropped them. My dad walked over and started picking them up. "See," he said. "Nothing here but some plastic pumpkins and fake spider webs." He walked around the entire basement, shining the flashlight in every corner. He checked behind the furnace, behind the water heater, and behind all the storage boxes. "There's nothing down here," he announced. But as we were walking back toward the stairs, I heard it again. The heavy breathing sound. This time my dad heard it too. He stopped walking and held up his hand for me to be quiet. We both listened carefully. The breathing was coming from somewhere above us, from the ceiling. My dad shined the flashlight up at the wooden beams. That's when we saw it. Something was hanging upside down from one of the beams. It was about the size of a person, but it didn't look human. Its body was covered in dark, matted fur. Its arms and legs were long and thin like spider legs. And its face was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen. It had those same glowing yellow-green eyes I had seen before. But its mouth was full of sharp, pointed teeth. And it was smiling at us. My dad grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the stairs. "Run!" he shouted. We both ran up the stairs as fast as we could. Behind us, we could hear a loud thudding sound, like something heavy had dropped from the ceiling onto the floor. Then we heard that dragging sound again. But now it was moving fast, like whatever it was chasing us. We made it to the top of the stairs and slammed the door shut. My dad quickly turned the lock and pushed a chair against the door. "What was that thing?" I asked. My dad was breathing hard and his face was pale. "I don't know," he said, "but we're calling the police." My mom had heard us running and came into the kitchen. "What's going on?" she asked. My dad told her what we had seen. At first she didn't believe him, but when she saw how scared both of us were, she knew we were telling the truth. My dad called the police and tried to explain the situation. The dispatcher sounded skeptical, but she said she would send an officer. About 20 minutes later, a police car pulled up in front of our house. Officer Martinez came to the door. He was a middle-aged Hispanic man who looked like he had seen everything. My dad explained what had happened. Officer Martinez listened politely, but I could tell he thought we were crazy. "I'll take a look," he said, "but I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation." He had a powerful flashlight and a gun on his belt. We opened the basement door and he went down first. My dad and I stayed at the top of the stairs. Officer Martinez walked around the basement for about 10 minutes. He checked every corner and behind every box. He even looked up at the ceiling beams where we had seen the creature. Finally, he came back upstairs. "I didn't find anything unusual," he said, "but I did notice some scratches on one of the wooden beams. They look fresh, like something with claws was hanging there." Officer Martinez looked at us seriously. "I've been a cop for 15 years, he said. "I've seen a lot of strange things. I can't explain what you saw, but I believe you saw something." He gave us his card and told us to call if anything else happened. After he left, we sat around the kitchen table trying to figure out what to do. My mom suggested we call an exterminator. "Maybe it's some kind of animal that got into the house," she said. My dad wasn't convinced. "No animal I know of hangs upside down from ceiling beams," he said. "And those eyes, they weren't natural." We decided to avoid the basement for the rest of the night. My dad moved the washer and dryer hookups to the garage the next day. We hired movers to get all our storage boxes out of the basement. Then my dad sealed up the basement door with wooden boards and screws. "Whatever that thing is," he said, "it can stay down there. We'll just pretend the basement doesn't exist." For about a month, everything was quiet. We didn't hear any strange noises from below. The house felt normal again. I started to think that maybe the creature had left. Maybe it had found another place to live. But then, on a cold November night, I woke up to a sound. It was coming from inside the walls. That same dragging sound, but muffled, like something was moving through the space between the walls. The sound started in the basement area and moved up through the house. I could hear it traveling through the walls of the first floor. Then it started moving up toward the second floor, toward my bedroom. I pulled the covers over my head and tried to pretend I wasn't hearing it, but the sound got closer and closer. Finally, it stopped right outside my bedroom wall. I could hear the heavy breathing again, right on the other side of the wall from my bed. I wanted to scream for my parents, but I was too scared to make any noise. I just lay there frozen with fear. The breathing continued for what felt like hours. Then, just before dawn, it stopped. I heard the dragging sound moving back down through the walls, back down to the basement. The next morning, I told my parents what had happened. My dad checked all the walls in my room. He found small cracks in the plaster near the baseboards. "It looks like something was trying to get through the wall," he said. That weekend, we put the house up for sale. We couldn't live there anymore knowing that thing was still in the basement. It took 3 months to find a buyer. During that time, I heard the creature in the wall several more times, but it never managed to break through. When we finally moved out, I felt like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. We never found out what that creature was or where it came from. My dad did some research at the library. He found out that the house had been empty for 2 years before the previous owners bought it. And before that, a family had lived there who mysteriously disappeared one night. The police never found any trace of them. Sometimes I wonder if that creature had something to do with their disappearance. And sometimes I wonder if it's still living in that basement, waiting for the next family to move in. I drive by that house occasionally when I'm in the neighborhood. It looks normal from the outside, but I know what's hiding underneath, and I feel sorry for whoever lives there now. The midnight train. This happened to me last summer when I was 19 years old. I was visiting my grandmother who lived in a small town called Cedar Falls. The town only had about 3,000 people and wasn't much to look at, but my grandmother had lived there her whole life and refused to move. She lived in a small house near the old railroad tracks. The tracks hadn't been used for passenger trains in over 20 years. Only freight trains passed through town now, and not very often. Maybe once or twice a week during the day. My grandmother always told me stories about the old days, when passenger trains would stop in Cedar Falls 4 times a day. She said the train station used to be the heart of the town. People would gather there to meet friends and family coming to visit. But the station had been torn down years ago. Now there was just an empty lot where it used to be. On my 3rd night visiting, I couldn't sleep. It was hot and humid, and my grandmother didn't have air conditioning. I was lying in the guest room with the window open, hoping for a breeze. The guest room faced the railroad tracks. I could see them clearly in the moonlight. Around midnight, I heard a sound that made me sit up in bed. It was the whistle of a train. But it wasn't the deep, modern horn of a freight train. This was an old-fashioned steam whistle, high-pitched and haunting. I got up and looked out the window. In the distance, I could see a light moving along the tracks toward town. As it got closer, I realized it was the headlight of an old steam locomotive, the kind they used back in the 1940s and 1950s. I rubbed my eyes, thinking I must be dreaming, but when I looked again, the train was still there. It was moving slowly, like it was looking for something. The locomotive was pulling several passenger cars behind it. All the windows in the cars were lit up with a warm yellow glow. As the train got closer, I could hear the rhythmic sound of the wheels on the tracks. Clickety-clack, clickety-clack, clickety-clack. It was a soothing sound that reminded me of old movies. The train slowed down even more as it approached the area where the station used to be. Then it came to a complete stop, right in front of my grandmother's house. I could see the locomotive clearly now. It was painted black with gold trim. Steam was rising from various parts of the engine. The headlight was bright and warm, not like the harsh white lights of modern trains. For a few minutes, nothing happened. The train just sat there on the tracks, steam hissing softly from the engine. Then I heard voices, people talking and laughing like they were having a good time. The voices were coming from inside the passenger cars. I could see shadows moving past the windows. Silhouettes of men in suits and hats, women in dresses. They looked like people from a different time period. Then the train whistle blew again. 2 long blasts followed by 2 short ones. The universal signal that a train was about to depart. I heard a conductor's voice calling out, "All aboard! All aboard for Chicago!" But there was no one on the platform. There was no platform. Just the empty lot where the station used to be. The train started moving again very slowly at first. As it passed by my window, I got a good look at the passengers. They were all dressed in clothes from the 1940s. The men wore suits and fedoras. The women wore dresses and had their hair done in victory rolls. They all looked happy and excited, like they were going on vacation. But there was something strange about them. Something that made my skin crawl. They all looked slightly transparent, like I could see through them to the seats behind them. And their faces. Their faces had a strange, pale glow to them. Not healthy and alive, but ghostly and ethereal. As the last car passed by my window, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A woman in a blue dress was standing at the back window of the train. She was looking directly at me. When our eyes met, she smiled and waved. But her smile was sad, like she was saying goodbye to someone she would never see again. The train disappeared into the distance, and the sound of the whistle faded away. I stood at the window for a long time, trying to make sense of what I had seen. Maybe it was just a dream. Maybe the heat was making me hallucinate. But it had seemed so real. The next morning, I told my grandmother about the train. She was sitting in her kitchen drinking coffee and reading the newspaper. When I finished my story, she put down her cup and looked at me seriously. "What time did you see this train?" she asked. "Around midnight," I said. My grandmother nodded slowly. "That was the Chicago Express," she said matter-of-factly. "It used to run through here every night at midnight. Stopped doing that in 1947. I stared at her in confusion. "But I saw it last night," I said. "It was right outside your house." My grandmother smiled sadly. "I know, dear," she said. "I've seen it too. Many times over the years." She got up and poured herself another cup of coffee. "The Chicago Express had an accident about 5 miles east of here," she continued. "Back in November of 1947. A freight train was on the tracks when it shouldn't have been. The passenger train hit it head-on. Killed everyone aboard. 43 people. I felt a chill run down my spine. So what I saw last night," I started to say, "were the souls of those 43 people," my grandmother finished, "still trying to make their journey to Chicago. Still trying to get home." My grandmother sat back down at the table. "The train appears every few months," she said. "Always at midnight, always on the anniversary of someone's death. Someone who was on that train. Tonight would have been the anniversary of Mary Henderson's death. She was 22 years old, going to Chicago to meet her fiancé. He was a soldier who had just come back from the war." My grandmother's eyes were sad as she told me this story. "I knew most of the people on that train," she said. "This was a small town back then. Everyone knew everyone. I lost a lot of friends that night." I didn't know what to say. My grandmother patted my hand gently. "Don't be scared, dear," she said. "They're not trying to hurt anyone. They're just lost souls trying to find their way home." That night, I made sure to stay awake until midnight. I wanted to see if the train would come again. I sat by the window in the guest room watching the tracks. At exactly 12 a.m., I heard the whistle in the distance. The same haunting sound as the night before. The headlight appeared, moving slowly along the tracks. This time I wasn't scared. I was curious. As the train approached the spot where the station used to be, it slowed down. But instead of stopping, it kept moving. Very slowly, like it was looking for something. As it passed by my window, I saw the same passengers as before. But tonight there were fewer of them. Only about half the train cars were lit up. And the people inside looked different. They still had that transparent, ghostly appearance. But they looked sadder somehow. More lost and confused. The woman in the blue dress was at the back window again. This time when she saw me, she didn't wave. She just pressed her hand against the glass and mouthed the words, "Help me." Then the train disappeared into the darkness. I sat there for a long time, thinking about what my grandmother had told me. These were real people who had died tragically. They weren't scary monsters or evil spirits. They were just souls who couldn't find peace. The next day, I asked my grandmother to tell me more about the accident. She brought out an old photo album from 1947. "This is the Cedar Falls train station," she said, pointing to a black and white photograph. The station was beautiful. It had a Victorian-style building with decorative trim and a long platform. People in 1940s clothing were standing around, waiting for trains. "And this," she said, turning the page, "is what was left after the accident." The photograph showed twisted metal and destroyed train cars. Rescue workers were pulling bodies from the wreckage. It was one of the most horrible things I had ever seen. "The accident happened because of a miscommunication," my grandmother explained. "The freight train was supposed to wait on a side track. But the dispatcher gave the wrong signal. By the time anyone realized the mistake, it was too late." She showed me newspaper clippings from the days following the accident. Headlines like "Tragic Train Collision Kills 43" and "Cedar Falls Mourns Itis Dead." There were individual stories about each victim. Young couples going on their honeymoons. Businessmen traveling for work. families visiting relatives. All of them with hopes and dreams that were cut short in an instant. Mary Henderson, my grandmother said, pointing to a photograph of a pretty young woman. She was supposed to marry her fiancé the following weekend. He waited at the station in Chicago for 3 days before he got the news. Never married anyone else. Died alone 30 years later. I looked at the photograph of Mary Henderson. She had kind eyes and a bright smile. She looked so full of life and hope. Is she the woman in the blue dress? I asked. My grandmother nodded. I think so, she said. Mary always wore blue. It was her favorite color. That night, I decided to do something different. When I heard the train whistle at midnight, I got dressed and went outside. I walked over to the empty lot where the station used to be. The train appeared right on schedule. As it slowed down near the former station, I called out, "Mary, Mary Henderson." The train came to a stop. The woman in the blue dress appeared at the back window. She looked at me with those same sad eyes. "Mary," I said more softly, "your fiancé James waited for you. He loved you until the day he died. He never forgot you." The woman's face changed. The sadness seemed to lift slightly. She smiled, a real smile this time. Not the heartbroken goodbye smile from before. "Mary," I continued, "you don't have to keep taking this train. James is waiting for you somewhere else now. Somewhere better than Chicago." The woman nodded slowly. She placed both hands on the window and mouthed, "Thank you." Then she stepped back from the window and disappeared. The train whistle blew twice. But this time it sounded different. Less mournful, more peaceful. The train started moving again. As it passed by me, I noticed that there were fewer passengers than before. Several of the train cars were now dark and empty. Over the next week, I researched the other victims of the train accident. I learned their names and their stories. Each night at midnight, I would go out to meet the train. I would call out to the passengers by name. I would tell them about their families, about how they were remembered and loved, about how it was okay to let go and move on. Each night, more passengers would disappear from the train, their souls finally finding the peace they had been searching for. By the end of the week, only a few train cars were still lit. Only a few lost souls remained. On my last night in Cedar Falls, I waited for the train one final time. When it appeared, there was only one passenger car with lights on, and only one figure visible in the window. It was the conductor, an elderly man in a train uniform. He had been the last to die in the accident. He had stayed at his post, trying to save as many passengers as possible. When the train stopped, the conductor stepped out onto the tracks. He walked over to where I was standing. "Thank you," he said in a voice that sounded like wind through autumn leaves. "You helped them find their way home. Now I can rest too." He tipped his conductor's cap to me. Then he walked back to the train and climbed aboard. The whistle blew one last time. A long, peaceful note that seemed to say goodbye. The train started moving and quickly picked up speed. As it disappeared into the distance, the light from the passenger car grew brighter and brighter, until it was like a star shining in the darkness. Then it was gone. I never saw the midnight train again. And according to my grandmother, no one else in Cedar Falls has seen it since then either. The souls of the Chicago Express had finally found their way home, all because someone took the time to listen to their stories, and to remind them that they were loved and remembered. Sometimes the most frightening things are not evil at all. Sometimes they are just lost and need someone to show them the way. The babysitter. This happened to me 2 years ago when I was 17 years old. I was babysitting for the Morrison family who lived across town. Mr. and Mrs. Morrison had 3 children. Tommy was 8 years old, Sarah was 6, and baby Emma was only 18 months old. The Morrisons were going to a wedding that Saturday night. They said they would be home around midnight. I had babysat for them several times before, and the kids were always well behaved. Tommy and Sarah would usually play quietly or watch TV. Baby Emma would go to sleep around 8 p.m. and sleep through the night. It was always an easy job, and the Morrisons paid well. The Morrison house was a large 2-story colonial in a nice neighborhood. It was the kind of house that looked perfect from the outside. Manicured lawn, flower beds, white picket fence. But there was something about the house that I had never liked. Maybe it was because it was so quiet inside. Or maybe it was because of all the family photos on the walls. There were pictures everywhere of the Morrison family. Wedding photos, baby pictures, vacation snapshots. But in every single photo, everyone looked forced to smile, like they were pretending to be happy. The children's eyes especially looked sad, even when they were smiling. I arrived at the Morrison house at 6 p.m. Mrs. Morrison answered the door wearing a black evening dress. She looked elegant but tired. "Thank you so much for coming, Jessica," she said. "I left dinner for the kids in the refrigerator. Just heat it up in the microwave." She gave me the usual instructions about bedtimes and emergency numbers. Mr. Morrison came downstairs wearing a tuxedo. He barely acknowledged me, just grabbed his car keys and headed for the door. "We'll be back by midnight," Mrs. Morrison said as they left. "Call if you need anything." After they drove away, I went inside and locked the door. Tommy and Sarah were in the living room watching cartoons. Baby Emma was playing with blocks on the floor. Everything seemed normal. I heated up chicken nuggets and mac and cheese for dinner. The kids ate quietly while I fed Emma in her high chair. After dinner, we all went back to the living room. I put on a Disney movie for Tommy and Sarah. Emma crawled around on the floor, babbling to herself. Around 7:30 p.m., I noticed that Emma was getting cranky. She was rubbing her eyes and crying. "It's time for Emma's bath and bedtime," I told Tommy and Sarah. "Can you two be good while I take care of your sister?" They nodded and continued watching their movie. I carried Emma upstairs to the bathroom. The second floor of the house was even quieter than the first floor. There were more family photos lining the hallway, but these photos were older. Some of them looked like they were from the 1980s and 1990s. As I walked past the photos, I noticed something strange. In the older photos, there were 4 children, not 3. There was Tommy, Sarah, Emma, and another little girl. The 4th child looked to be about 5 years old with blonde hair and blue eyes, but I had never seen this child before. The Morrisons had never mentioned having another daughter. I stopped to look at the photos more closely. In the older pictures, the blonde girl was always standing next to Sarah. They looked like they could be twins. But in the more recent photos, the blonde girl was gone. It was like she had just disappeared from the family. I felt a chill run down my spine. What had happened to the 4th Morrison child? I continued to the bathroom and gave Emma her bath. She seemed more relaxed in the warm water. After her bath, I put her in her pajamas and carried her to her room. Emma's room was decorated with pink walls and stuffed animals. Her crib was in the corner next to a rocking chair. I gave Emma her bottle and rocked her until she fell asleep. Then I placed her gently in her crib and turned on the baby monitor. As I was leaving Emma's room, I heard a sound from down the hall. It sounded like a child giggling. But Tommy and Sarah were downstairs watching TV. I could hear the sound of their movie coming from the living room. I walked down the hall to investigate. The sound seemed to be coming from behind a closed door at the end of the hallway. I had never noticed this door before. It was painted white like all the other doors, but it had no doorknob. Just a smooth white surface where the handle should be. I pressed my ear against the door and listened. The giggling sound was definitely coming from inside. It sounded like a little girl playing. "Hello," I called softly. "Is someone in there?" The giggling stopped immediately. I waited for a moment, then tried the door. Even without a doorknob, I thought maybe it would push open, but the door was solid. It wouldn't budge. I went back downstairs to check on Tommy and Sarah. They were still watching their movie, completely absorbed in the story. "Hey guys," I said. "What's behind the door at the end of the upstairs hallway?" Tommy and Sarah looked at each other with strange expressions. "What door?" Tommy asked. "The white door with no doorknob," I explained. Sarah's face went pale. "We're not supposed to talk about that room," she whispered. "Why not?" I asked. Tommy looked scared. "Because of Lily," he said quietly. "Who's Lily?" I asked. Sarah started to cry. "Lily was our sister," she said. "But she's gone now. Mommy and Daddy said we're not allowed to talk about her anymore." I sat down on the couch between Tommy and Sarah. "What happened to Lily?" I asked gently. Tommy wiped his eyes with his sleeve. "She got sick," he said. Really sick. She had to go to the hospital a lot. And then one day she didn't come home." Sarah was crying harder now. "Mommy and Daddy locked her room and said we couldn't go in there anymore. They took down all her pictures except the old ones upstairs. They said it was too sad to remember her." I felt my heart breaking for these children. They had lost their sister and weren't even allowed to grieve for her. "When did Lily die?" I asked. "Last year," Tommy said. "Right before Christmas. She was 5 years old." Suddenly, I heard the baby monitor crackle. Emma was crying in her crib upstairs. But there was another sound too. A soft voice singing a lullaby. The voice sounded like a young child. Rockabye baby in the treetop. I looked at Tommy and Sarah. Do you guys hear that? I asked. They both nodded with wide eyes. That's Lily, Sarah whispered. She used to sing to Emma every night. I grabbed the baby monitor and listened more carefully. Emma's crying was getting quieter. The lullaby continued. When the wind blows, the cradle will rock. The voice was sweet and gentle. Not scary at all. Just a big sister trying to comfort her baby sister. I went upstairs to check on Emma. When I got to her room, she was lying peacefully in her crib, no longer crying. Her eyes were closed and she seemed to be listening to something. The lullaby had stopped, but Emma looked calm and content. I checked the room to make sure everything was okay. That's when I saw her. A little girl with blonde hair and blue eyes was sitting in the rocking chair. She was wearing a white nightgown and had a peaceful expression on her face. She looked exactly like the girl in the family photos. Lily? I whispered. The little girl looked at me and smiled. Shoo, she said, putting her finger to her lips. Emma's sleeping. I wasn't scared. There was something so innocent and loving about this child. Even though I knew she was dead, she didn't feel like a ghost. She felt like a protective big sister. Are you okay? I asked softly. Lily nodded. I watch over Emma, she said. And Tommy and Sarah too. Mommy and Daddy are too sad to see me. But the kids know I'm still here. I sat down on the floor next to the rocking chair. They miss you, I said. Lily's smile faded a little. I miss them too, she said. I wish I could play with them like before. But I can't leave Emma alone. She needs someone to take care of her at night. I understood. Lily had died, but her love for her family was so strong that she couldn't let go. She was staying to protect her siblings. Lily, I said carefully, your parents love you very much. They're just too sad to talk about you right now. But that doesn't mean they want to forget you. Lily looked at me with those bright blue eyes. Really? She asked. Really? I said. Sometimes when people lose someone they love, they think it hurts too much to remember. But remembering the good times can help the hurt go away. Lily was quiet for a moment. I want Mommy and Daddy to remember the good times, she said. I want them to be happy again. What can I do to help? I asked. Lily thought about it. There's a box under my bed, she said. It has all my favorite things in it. Pictures and drawings and my favorite stuffed animal. Mommy hid it there after I died. Maybe if you showed it to them, they would remember how much I loved them. I nodded. I'll try, I said. Lily smiled again. Thank you, she said. You're nice. I have to go now. Emma will wake up if I stay too long. She stood up from the rocking chair. Will you tell Tommy and Sarah that I love them? She asked. And that I'm always watching out for them? I will, I promised. Lily walked toward the door, then stopped and looked back. And tell Mommy and Daddy that it's okay to be sad, she said. But it's also okay to be happy. I want them to be happy. Then she was gone. Just disappeared like she had never been there. But the rocking chair was still moving slightly, like someone had just gotten up from it. I stayed with Emma for a few more minutes to make sure she was sleeping peacefully. Then I went back downstairs to Tommy and Sarah. Was that Lily? Sarah asked when she saw me. Yes, I said. She wanted me to tell you that she loves you and she's watching out for you. Both children smiled for the first time that evening. We love her too, Tommy said. We miss her so much. Around 11:30 p.m., I heard a car pull into the driveway. Mr. and Mrs. Morrison were home early. I quickly told Tommy and Sarah to go brush their teeth and get ready for bed. When the Morrisons came inside, they looked tired and sad. The wedding had probably reminded them of happier times. How were the kids? Mrs. Morrison asked. They were wonderful, I said. Emma went to sleep without any trouble. And Tommy and Sarah were very well behaved. Mrs. Morrison smiled weakly and paid me for babysitting. Mr. Morrison was already heading upstairs to check on the children. As Mrs. Morrison was walking me to the door, I made a decision. Mrs. Morrison, I said carefully, the children talked about Lily tonight. Mrs. Morrison froze. Her face went pale and her eyes filled with tears. They're not supposed to talk about her, she said quietly. With respect, I said, I think they need to talk about her. They love her and they miss her. Pretending she never existed isn't helping them heal. Mrs. Morrison started crying. It's just too hard, she said. Every time I think about her, it feels like my heart is breaking all over again. I understand, I said. But Lily wouldn't want you to be this sad forever. She would want you to remember the joy she brought to your family. Mrs. Morrison looked at me with surprise. How do you know what Lily would want? She asked. I took a deep breath. Because she told me, I said. I explained what had happened upstairs. About seeing Lily in Emma's room. About the conversation we had. About the box under her bed. Mrs. Morrison listened with wide eyes. You saw her? She whispered. She's really still here? She's here because she loves you, I said. All of you. But she's worried about you and Mr. Morrison. She wants you to be happy again. Mrs. Morrison was crying harder now. But these were different tears. Not just sad tears, but tears of relief. Show me, she said. Show me the box. We went upstairs to Lily's room. Mrs. Morrison had a key to unlock the door. The room was exactly as Lily had left it. Pink walls, stuffed animals, a small bed with a princess comforter. Under the bed we found the box Lily had mentioned. It was filled with drawings, photographs, and a well-loved teddy bear. Mrs. Morrison picked up the teddy bear and held it close. This was Mr. Snuggles, she said, smiling through her tears. Lily took him everywhere. We looked through the drawings together. Pictures of the family, rainbows, flowers, and hearts. All signed Love Lily in a child's handwriting. She was so creative, Mrs. Morrison said. Always making something beautiful. Mr. Morrison appeared in the doorway. What are you doing in here? He asked. His voice was stern, but I could see the pain in his eyes. Mrs. Morrison showed him the box. Look, she said. Look at all the beautiful things our daughter made. Look at how much love is in these pictures. Mr. Morrison's expression softened. He sat down on Lily's bed and picked up one of the drawings. It showed the whole family holding hands under a rainbow. She drew this the week before she went to the hospital for the last time, he said quietly. She said it was to remember us by when she was away. They spent the next hour going through Lily's belongings, sharing memories and crying together, but also laughing at some of the funny things Lily used to do. As I was getting ready to leave, Mrs. Morrison hugged me. Thank you, she said. Thank you for helping us remember. Lily was right. It's okay to be sad, but it's also okay to be happy. We need to celebrate her life, not just mourn her death. A few weeks later, Mrs. Morrison called me. She said the family was doing much better. They had put some of Lily's drawings up around the house. Tommy and Sarah were allowed to talk about their sister again. And Emma seemed to be sleeping better at night. The strange thing is, Mrs. Morrison said, we don't hear the lullabies anymore. It's like Lily knows we're okay now. Like she's finally at peace. I smiled when she told me this. I knew that Lily had moved on. Her family was healing and she didn't need to watch over them so closely anymore. She could rest knowing that she was loved and remembered. Sometimes the most frightening experiences can lead to beautiful healing. Sometimes what we think are ghosts are really just love that refuses to die. And sometimes all a soul needs is someone to help bridge the gap between the living and the dead. To remind both sides that love never really ends. The Forest Watchers. This happened to me during the summer of 2021 when I was 18 years old. I was working at a summer camp called Pine Ridge in the mountains of Colorado. The camp was for kids between 8 and 14 years old. I was hired as a counselor for the 12-year-old boys' cabin. There were 8 boys in my cabin and they were all good kids. A little rowdy sometimes, but nothing I couldn't handle. The camp was located deep in the forest, about 30 miles from the nearest town. It was surrounded by tall pine trees and had a beautiful lake in the center. During the day, the forest was peaceful and welcoming. The trees provided cool shade from the summer sun. Birds sang in the branches and squirrels chattered as they played. It felt like paradise. But at night, the forest changed completely. The trees seemed to close in around the camp. The shadows became deeper and darker. And sometimes you could feel eyes watching you from between the trees. The camp director, Mr. Peterson, had been running Pine Ridge for over 20 years. He was a friendly man in his 50s who genuinely loved working with children. But there was something he never told the new counselors. Something about the forest that surrounded the camp. I found out about it during my second week there. It was a Thursday night and I was doing a final check on my cabin. All 8 boys were asleep in their bunks. The cabin was quiet except for the soft sound of their breathing. I was about to turn off the lights when I heard something outside. It sounded like footsteps walking around the cabin. Slow, deliberate footsteps in the dirt and fallen leaves. I went to the window and looked out into the darkness. The camp had a few security lights, but they didn't reach very far into the forest. I could see the other cabins in the distance. They were all dark and quiet. Everyone should have been asleep. The footsteps continued around the cabin. It sounded like someone was circling the building. I grabbed my flashlight and went outside to investigate. "Hello?" I called softly, not wanting to wake the boys. "Is someone out there?" The footsteps stopped immediately. I turned on my flashlight and swept it around the area. I could see the dirt path that led to our cabin. I could see the picnic table where the boys ate their meals. But I didn't see anyone. I walked around the cabin, following the path the footsteps had taken. In the soft dirt, I found clear footprints. But these weren't normal human footprints. They were much larger than any person's feet. And they had strange, long marks extending from the toes, like claws. I knelt down to examine the prints more closely. They were at least 12 inches long and 4 inches wide. Whatever had made them was walking on 2 legs like a person, but the shape was all wrong. I followed the trail of prints as far as my flashlight would reach. They led straight into the forest, into the darkness between the trees. I wasn't brave enough to follow them any further. I went back inside the cabin and locked the door. The boys were still sleeping peacefully. None of them had heard anything. I sat in the chair by the door for the rest of the night, listening for any sounds from outside, but the forest was quiet. The next morning, I went to find Mr. Peterson. He was in his office, going over the schedule for the day's activities. "Mr. Peterson," I said, "I need to ask you about something." "What's on your mind, David?" he asked, looking up from his paperwork. I told him about the footsteps and the strange prints I had found. As I spoke, I watched his expression change. He went from curious to concerned to something that looked like fear. "You saw the prints?" he asked quietly. "Yes, sir," I said. "They were definitely not human." Mr. Peterson closed his office door and sat back down. "David," he said, "I'm going to tell you something that I don't usually share with the new counselors. But since you've already encountered them, you need to know the truth." He pulled out a thick folder from his desk drawer. "Pine Ridge has been dealing with this situation for 15 years, he said. "Ever since we first opened the camp. There are things living in these forests. Things that watch us. Things that are curious about humans, especially children." He opened the folder and showed me photographs. Pictures of the same strange footprints I had seen. Some were around cabins, some were near the lake. Some were even inside buildings. "We call them the Watchers," Mr. Peterson continued. "We don't know exactly what they are. They're not animals, at least not any animals that science has identified. They walk upright like humans, but they're much larger. And they seem to be very intelligent." I stared at the photographs in disbelief. "Have you ever seen one?" I asked. Mr. Peterson nodded grimly. "Once," he said. "About 10 years ago. I was doing a late-night check of the camp when I saw it by the lake. It was about 8 feet tall and covered in dark fur. Its arms were longer than a human's, almost reaching the ground. And its eyes." He shuddered at the memory. "Its eyes were bright yellow and very intelligent. It was watching me just as intently as I was watching it." "What did you do?" I asked. "I slowly backed away and went inside," he said. "The next morning, I found footprints leading from the lake into the forest, but also leading to every single cabin in the camp. It had checked on all the children while they slept. I felt a chill run down my spine. "Why don't you close the camp?" I asked. "Why keep bringing children here if there are dangerous creatures in the forest?" Mr. Peterson looked at me seriously. "Because they're not dangerous," he said. "In 15 years, not a single child has been harmed. The Watchers seem to be protective of children, not threatening to them. Several times we've had kids wander off into the forest. Kids who should have been lost for hours or even days. But they always come back within 30 minutes. They say they got lost, but then a nice tall man showed them the way back to camp." He showed me more documents from the folder. Reports from counselors over the years. Stories similar to mine. Footprints around cabins. Sounds in the forest at night. Brief glimpses of large, dark figures moving between the trees. "The Watchers are curious about human children," Mr. Peterson explained. "They watch over them like guardians. We think they might be an unknown species of primate. highly intelligent and surprisingly gentle. But why do they care about the children? I asked. Mr. Peterson shrugged. We don't know, he said. Maybe they have children of their own. Maybe they see human children as vulnerable and in need of protection. All we know is that the children are safer here than they would be in most places. That night, I paid closer attention to the sounds coming from the forest. Around 10 p.m., after all the boys were asleep, I heard them again. The slow, heavy footsteps circling the cabin. But this time I wasn't afraid. I understood now that whatever was out there was not trying to hurt anyone. It was just making sure the children were safe. I went to the window and looked out into the darkness. Thank you, I whispered toward the forest. Thank you for watching over them. The footsteps stopped for a moment, then continued in what sounded like a more relaxed pace, like whatever was out there had heard me and understood. Over the next few weeks, I became more comfortable with the presence of the watchers. I would hear them almost every night, sometimes around my cabin, sometimes around the other cabins. Always the same slow, careful footsteps, always checking to make sure the children were safe. One night, I decided to try something different. After the boys were asleep, I went outside and sat on the steps of the cabin. I brought a book and a small lantern to read by. I wanted to show the watchers that I wasn't afraid of them. I sat there for about an hour, reading and listening to the sounds of the forest. Around midnight, I heard the familiar footsteps approaching. But instead of circling the cabin, they stopped about 20 feet away. I looked up from my book but didn't see anything in the darkness beyond my lantern's light. I know you're there, I said quietly. I want you to know that I appreciate what you do. These kids are lucky to have someone watching over them. I heard a low sound that might have been a response. Not quite a growl, but not quite a voice either. It sounded almost like a rumble of acknowledgement. I went back to reading, and the footsteps resumed their patrol around the cabin. But now they sounded more relaxed, less cautious. The next morning, one of my boys, a kid named Marcus, came up to me with an excited expression. David, he said, I saw the coolest thing last night. What did you see? I asked, trying to sound casual. I got up to go to the bathroom and I looked out the window, Marcus said. There was this really tall guy standing by the trees. He waved at me. What did this tall guy look like? I asked. Marcus thought about it. He was really, really tall, he said. Taller than my dad. And he had long arms and was kind of fuzzy looking. But he seemed nice. He waved at me like he was saying good night. I smiled at Marcus. That sounds pretty cool, I said. Did it scare you? Marcus shook his head. Nah, he said. He seemed friendly, like he was making sure we were okay. A few days later, something happened that made me understand the watchers even better. One of the boys from another cabin, a kid named Jake, went missing during a hiking trip. Jake was known for wandering off and not paying attention to directions. The counselors noticed he was gone when they stopped for lunch. They searched the immediate area but couldn't find him. Mr. Peterson organized all the counselors into search teams. We spread out through the forest, calling Jake's name. I was searching a section of forest about half a mile from where Jake had last been seen. The trees were thick and it was easy to get disoriented. I had been searching for about 2 hours when I heard a child crying. I followed the sound and found Jake sitting under a large pine tree. He was scared and had been crying, but he wasn't hurt. Jake, I called out. Everyone's been looking for you. Jake looked up at me with relief. David, he said, I got so lost. But the tall man showed me where to wait for you. I knelt down next to Jake. What tall man? I asked. The really tall guy with the long arms, Jake said. I was walking around in circles and getting more scared. Then I saw him standing by this tree. He pointed to this spot and made a sound like he wanted me to sit here. So I did. And then you found me. I looked around at the surrounding forest. We were in a small clearing that would be easy to spot from any direction. Jake had been guided to the perfect place for rescuers to find him. Did the tall man say anything to you? I asked. Jake shook his head. He didn't talk like people do, he said, but I could tell he was trying to help me. He stayed with me for a while to make sure I wasn't scared. Then he went back into the trees. I radioed the other search teams to let them know Jake was safe. While we waited for them to reach us, I asked Jake more questions. Was the tall man scary looking? Not really, Jake said. He was different, but not scary. He had kind eyes. and he was very gentle, like he understood that I was just a kid who was scared. When the other counselors arrived, Jake told them the same story, about the tall man who had helped him find a safe place to wait. Mr. Peterson listened to Jake's account with a knowing look. Later that evening, he pulled me aside. "The Watchers saved that boy's life," he said. "Jake could have wandered for hours in the wrong direction. He could have fallen into a ravine or gotten completely lost. But one of them guided him to safety." "How do you think they knew we were looking for him?" I asked. Mr. Peterson smiled. "They're always watching," he said. "They probably saw our search teams and understood what was happening. They're more intelligent than we give them credit for." That night, I went outside again to sit on the cabin steps. I wanted to thank the Watchers for helping Jake. Around midnight, I heard the familiar footsteps. But tonight there were more of them. It sounded like several Watchers were moving through the forest. "Thank you," I said toward the darkness. "Thank you for helping Jake today. You probably saved his life." I heard that low rumbling sound again. But this time it came from multiple directions. Like several Watchers were responding to me. It was a sound of acknowledgement and maybe even appreciation. Like they were glad that someone understood what they were trying to do. The rest of the summer passed peacefully. I continued to hear the Watchers patrolling the camp each night. And I continued to sit outside occasionally to let them know I was grateful. The boys in my cabin never seemed frightened by the sounds from the forest. If anything, they slept better knowing that someone was watching over them. A few more children reported seeing the tall men in the forest, but their descriptions were always the same. Friendly, protective figures who seemed to care about their well-being. On the last night of camp, I decided to try something bold. After all the boys were asleep, I walked to the edge of the forest. I stood at the tree line with my flashlight turned off. "I'm leaving tomorrow," I said to the darkness. "I want you to know that this has been an amazing experience. You've taught me that not everything unknown is dangerous. Sometimes the things that seem scary are actually the most caring." I waited in the darkness for several minutes. Then I heard footsteps approaching. Slow, careful footsteps that stopped about 10 feet away from me. I could sense a large presence in the darkness. Something much taller and broader than a human. "Thank you for letting me be part of this," I said. "Thank you for showing me what it means to truly protect someone." I heard a soft sound, almost like a sigh. Then I felt something touch my shoulder. It was a large, gentle hand covered in coarse fur. The touch lasted only a second, but it conveyed so much. Gratitude, respect, and maybe even friendship. Then the hand was gone, and I heard the footsteps moving away. I stood there for a few more minutes, feeling honored by the experience. Then I went back to the cabin to get some sleep before the long trip home. The next morning, as the buses were loading up to take the children home, I took one last walk around the camp. I found fresh footprints near every cabin. The Watchers had done their final patrol of the summer, making sure all the children were safe until the very last moment. As my bus pulled away from Pine Ridge, I looked back at the forest one more time. I couldn't see them, but I knew the Watchers were there. Guardians of the forest, protectors of children. Proof that the world still holds mysteries and wonders. I returned to Pine Ridge the following summer, and the summer after that. Each year the Watchers were still there, still patrolling the camp at night, still protecting the children who came to experience the beauty of the forest. I never saw one of them clearly again, but I didn't need to. I knew they were there, and that was enough. Some of the other counselors thought I was crazy for sitting outside at night. They thought I was taking unnecessary risks, but I knew the truth. The forest around Pine Ridge was one of the safest places on Earth, because it was protected by beings who understood the value of innocence, who understood that children deserve to explore and play without fear. The Watchers taught me that fear often comes from misunderstanding, that something can look frightening but have the gentlest heart, and that sometimes the best protection comes from the most unexpected sources. I still work at summer camps, though not at Pine Ridge anymore. But wherever I go, I remember the lessons the Watchers taught me. To look beyond appearances, to appreciate the unknown rather than fear it, and to always protect those who cannot protect themselves. Sometimes the things that go bump in the night are not trying to scare us. Sometimes they are the very things keeping us safe. The apartment above. This happened to me last year when I was 20 years old. I had just started college and was living in my first apartment. It was a small one-bedroom place on the second floor of an old building. The rent was cheap, which was perfect for my college budget. but I should have wondered why it was so affordable. The building was from the 1950s and hadn't been updated much. The floors creaked, the pipes made noise, and the walls were thin. But it had character, and I was excited to have my own place. My apartment was cozy with hardwood floors and big windows. The kitchen was tiny but functional. The bedroom was just big enough for a bed and a desk. And the living room had space for a couch and my TV. Above me on the third floor there was another apartment. I never met my upstairs neighbor in person, but I could hear them moving around throughout the day and night. Footsteps across the floor, doors closing, water running. Normal apartment sounds that you learn to ignore. At least that's what I thought they were at first. For the first few weeks, everything seemed perfectly normal. I settled into my routine of classes, studying, and work. The sounds from upstairs became background noise. Sometimes I would hear music playing softly. Sometimes the TV would be on. Sometimes there would be the sound of someone cooking in the kitchen. It was actually kind of comforting to know someone else was around. The building felt less lonely with signs of life above me. But then I started to notice something strange about the timing. The footsteps upstairs seemed to follow a very specific pattern. Every night at exactly 11:30 p.m., I would hear someone walking across the floor. From what sounded like the bedroom to what must have been the kitchen. Then back to the bedroom. This would repeat 3 times, always taking exactly 5 minutes. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence. Maybe my neighbor had insomnia and needed a snack before bed. Or maybe they were taking medication that required a specific schedule. But it happened every single night without fail. Even on weekends when most people's routines change. After a month of this pattern, I became curious about my upstairs neighbor. I had never seen anyone going up to the 3rd floor. I had never heard voices or seen lights in the windows. Just those same footsteps every night at 11:30. I decided to introduce myself. One Saturday afternoon, I baked some cookies and went upstairs. The 3rd floor hallway was dimmer than the 2nd floor. There was only one door, which made sense since the apartments were the same size. I knocked on the door and waited. No answer. I could smell something strange in the hallway. Not exactly unpleasant, but old and musty. Like flowers that had been left in water too long. I knocked again, a little louder this time. "Hello," I called. "I'm your downstairs neighbor. I brought some cookies." Still no answer. I pressed my ear to the door and listened. The apartment was completely silent. No TV, no music, no sounds of movement. It was like no one was home. But I knew someone had to be there. I had heard the footsteps just the night before. I left the cookies by the door with a note introducing myself. When I checked the next day, the cookies were gone. But there was no thank you note or any sign that my neighbor wanted to meet. That night, I paid closer attention to the sounds from upstairs. At exactly 11:30 p.m., the footsteps began. From the bedroom to the kitchen and back. 3 times, taking exactly 5 minutes. But now that I was really listening, I noticed something else. The footsteps sounded different than normal walking. They were slower and more deliberate. Like someone who was having trouble moving. Or someone who was very, very tired. I also noticed that I never heard a door open or close upstairs. Never heard water running or the refrigerator opening. Just those same footsteps in the same pattern. Over the next few weeks, I tried several more times to meet my neighbor. I knocked on their door at different times of day. I left more notes with my phone number. I even tried waiting in the hallway to catch them coming or going. But I never saw anyone. The cookies and notes would disappear, but there was never any response. It was like I was living below a ghost. One evening, I was studying late when I heard something different. Instead of the usual footsteps, there was a loud thud from upstairs. Like something heavy had fallen. Then silence. I waited for the footsteps to resume, but they didn't. I was worried that my neighbor might have fallen and hurt themselves, especially if they were elderly or had mobility issues. I went upstairs and knocked on the door. "Are you okay up there?" I called. I heard a loud noise. No response. I tried the door handle, expecting it to be locked, but it turned easily and the door opened. The apartment was completely dark inside. "Hello," I called as I stepped into the doorway. "I'm your downstairs neighbor. I just want to make sure you're okay." I reached for the light switch and flipped it on. The apartment was empty. Not just empty of people, but empty of everything. No furniture, no belongings, no signs that anyone lived there. The walls were bare and the floors were covered in dust. It looked like no one had lived there for years. But that was impossible. I had been hearing footsteps every night for 2 months. I walked through the apartment, turning on lights in each room. The bedroom was empty except for dust and cobwebs. The kitchen had no appliances, no dishes, nothing. The bathroom was clean but obviously unused. In the living room, I found something that made my blood run cold. There were footprints in the dust on the floor. The same path I had been hearing every night, from the bedroom to the kitchen and back. But the prints were old and faded, like they had been made a long time ago and never disturbed. I knelt down to examine them more closely. They were the footprints of a woman wearing slippers. Small feet, probably size 6 or 7. And they followed the exact same pattern I had been hearing. 3 trips from the bedroom to the kitchen. I stood up and looked around the empty apartment. "Who are you?" I whispered to the silence. "What are you trying to do?" As if in response, I heard a sound from the bedroom. A soft sighing sound like someone letting out a breath. I walked toward the bedroom, my heart pounding. The room was still empty, but I could feel a presence. Something sad and lonely and lost. "Are you here?" I asked softly. The sighing sound came again, closer this time, like someone was standing right next to me. I wasn't scared exactly. The presence didn't feel threatening or malicious. It felt more like someone who was confused or searching for something. "What do you need?" I asked. I heard what sounded like whispered words, but I couldn't make them out. Like someone trying to speak but not having enough strength. I stayed in the apartment for another 20 minutes, walking through the rooms and trying to understand what I was experiencing. Finally, I decided to leave. Whatever was happening, I wasn't going to solve it tonight. As I reached the door, I heard the whispered voice again. This time I could make out one word: help. I turned back toward the empty apartment. "How can I help you?" I asked, but there was no response. The apartment felt empty again, like whatever presence had been there was gone. I went back downstairs and spent the rest of the night researching my building. I found old newspaper articles and property records online. What I discovered made everything make sense. In 1987, a woman named Eleanor Patterson had lived in the 3rd-floor apartment. She was 73 years old and lived alone. Eleanor had dementia and often got confused about where she was. One night, she had gotten up to go to the kitchen for her medication. But in her confusion, she had taken the wrong pills. She had overdosed accidentally and died alone in her apartment. Her body wasn't found for 3 days. The newspaper article said that Eleanor's routine was very specific. Every night at 11:30, she would get up to take her medicine. She would walk from her bedroom to the kitchen and back 3 times, because she often forgot whether she had already taken her pills. The apartment had been empty ever since. Several tenants had tried to live there over the years, but they all reported hearing footsteps at night. Most of them moved out within a few months. Now I understood what I had been hearing. Eleanor was still trying to take her nightly medication, still following the same routine she had maintained for years, still confused and not understanding that she was dead. The next night at 11:30, I went upstairs with a glass of water and some vitamins. I unlocked the empty apartment and went inside. "Eleanor?" I called softly. "Is that you?" I heard the familiar footsteps starting in the bedroom. "Eleanor, I brought your medicine," I said. The footsteps stopped. I walked to the bedroom and set the vitamins and water on the floor. "Here's your medication," I said, "and some water to take it with." I heard that soft sighing sound again, but this time it sounded like relief, like someone who had been searching for something and finally found it. "You don't have to keep looking for your medicine," I said gently. "It's right here. You can rest now." The apartment became very quiet. I could feel the presence becoming calmer, more peaceful. "Thank you, Eleanor," I whispered. "Thank you for being such a good neighbor. Even after all these years." I stayed for a few more minutes, then went back downstairs. That night, for the first time in months, I didn't hear any footsteps. The apartment above me was finally silent. I continued to leave medicine for Eleanor once a week, just in case she needed the reminder that someone cared about her. But I never heard the footsteps again. A few months later, I was talking to my landlord about renewing my lease. "You know," he said, "you're the first tenant who's stayed more than 6 months. Most people complain about noises from the empty apartment upstairs. But you've never mentioned anything like that." I smiled. "I think the upstairs neighbor just needed someone to understand what she was going through," I said. "Sometimes people just need to know that someone cares." My landlord looked confused, but he didn't ask any more questions. I lived in that apartment for 3 more years. It was always quiet and peaceful. Sometimes I would leave flowers by Eleanor's door on holidays, or a card on what I had learned was her birthday. Small gestures to let her know she wasn't forgotten. I never saw her or heard her voice clearly, but sometimes I would catch a faint scent of lavender in the hallway. Eleanor's favorite perfume, according to the newspaper articles. It was her way of saying thank you. When I finally moved out to a bigger place, I left a note for the next tenant, explaining about Eleanor and what she needed. I hope whoever lives there now understands that sometimes the scariest experiences are just cries for help. That ghosts aren't always trying to frighten us. Sometimes they're just lost souls who need someone to show them kindness. Eleanor taught me about compassion for those who are confused and afraid. She taught me that death doesn't always bring peace. Sometimes it just brings more confusion. But a little understanding and care can make all the difference, even for those who are no longer alive. The lake house memory. This happened to me 3 years ago when I was 17 years old. My family inherited a lake house from my great-aunt Martha, who had passed away. None of us had visited the house in over 10 years. But my parents decided we should spend a week there that summer to decide what to do with the property. The house was located on Lake Serenity, about 3 hours from our home. It was a small, rustic cabin built in the 1960s. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a living room with a stone fireplace. The house sat right on the water's edge with a small dock extending into the lake. When we arrived, the house felt frozen in time. All of Aunt Martha's belongings were still there. Her clothes in the closets, her dishes in the kitchen cabinets. Family photos covering every surface. My parents decided to spend the week sorting through her things, deciding what to keep, what to donate, and what to throw away. I was assigned to help, but mostly I just wanted to enjoy the lake. It was beautiful and peaceful, surrounded by tall pine trees. The water was clear and cool, perfect for swimming. On our second day there, I was looking through a box of old photographs. Most of them were pictures of family gatherings and holidays. But there was one photo that caught my attention. It showed a young girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, standing on the dock. She had long blonde hair and was wearing a white sundress. She was smiling and waving at the camera. Behind her, the lake sparkled in the sunshine. I had never seen this girl before. She wasn't a family member that I recognized. "Mom," I called, holding up the photo. "Who is this little girl?" My mother came over and looked at the picture. Her face went pale and she seemed disturbed. "Where did you find this?" she asked quietly. "In this box of photos," I said. "Who is she?" My mother sat down heavily in a chair. "That's Rebecca," she said softly. She was Aunt Martha's daughter. I was confused. Aunt Martha had never been married and never had children. At least, that's what I had always been told. "I don't understand," I said. My mother sighed deeply. "Rebecca drowned in this lake when she was 9 years old," she said. "It happened in 1978, long before you were born." Aunt Martha was devastated. She never got over losing her. She never talked about Rebecca after that. The family decided it was too painful for her. My mother took the photo from my hands. "Martha kept this house exactly as it was when Rebecca was alive," she continued. "She couldn't bear to change anything. She always hoped that somehow Rebecca would come back." I felt a chill run through me. "How did Rebecca drown?" I asked. "She was playing on the dock by herself," my mother explained. "Martha was inside making lunch. When she came out to call Rebecca in, she found her floating in the water. They think she slipped and hit her head. She couldn't swim well enough to save herself." That night, I couldn't stop thinking about Rebecca. I kept looking out at the lake and imagining that little girl playing on the dock. I wondered if she had been scared when she fell into the water. I wondered if she had called for help. Around midnight, I was lying in bed when I heard something outside. It sounded like a child laughing. Soft, happy laughter coming from the direction of the lake. I got up and looked out the bedroom window. The moon was bright and I could see the dock clearly, but there was no one there. The laughter continued for a few more minutes, then faded away. I convinced myself it was probably just the sound of water lapping against the dock, or maybe some night birds making unusual sounds. The next day, I decided to spend some time on the dock. I brought a book and a chair and sat in the sunshine. The dock was old but sturdy, made of weathered wood planks. As I was reading, I noticed something carved into one of the planks. "RM plus Daddy forever." It was carved in a child's handwriting. Rebecca Martha, I realized. She had carved her initials and a message to her father. But according to my mother, Rebecca's father had left when she was very young. Martha had raised her daughter alone. I traced the carved letters with my finger. They were deep and carefully made. This had been important to Rebecca. That afternoon, I asked my mother more about Rebecca's father. His name was David, she said. He was Martha's high school sweetheart. But he left when Rebecca was just 2 years old. Martha never heard from him again. Rebecca used to ask about him constantly. Martha would tell her that Daddy still loved her, even though he couldn't be with them. Rebecca always believed he would come back someday. I felt sad thinking about this little girl who had lost her father and then her life. She had carved that message on the dock, believing that her daddy would see it someday. That night, I heard the laughing again. But this time, I also heard splashing in the water, like someone was swimming or playing in the lake. I looked out the window and saw ripples on the water's surface. Small ripples like those made by a child swimming. But there was no one in the water. I watched for several minutes until the ripples stopped. Then everything was quiet again. The next morning, I found wet footprints on the dock. Small footprints about the size a 9-year-old would make. They led from the edge of the dock back toward the house. But they faded away before reaching the shore. I knelt down and measured one of the prints with my hand. It was tiny, definitely a child's foot. But the prints were drying quickly in the morning sun. Within an hour, they were completely gone. That day, while my parents were in town getting groceries, I decided to explore Rebecca's old bedroom. My mother had told me which room had been hers. It was the smaller of the 2 bedrooms overlooking the lake. The room was exactly as a 9-year-old girl had left it in 1978. A single bed with a pink bedspread. A small desk with coloring books and crayons. Shelves full of dolls and stuffed animals. On the dresser there were more photos of Rebecca. Pictures of her on the dock, swimming in the lake, playing with toys. In every photo, she looked happy and carefree. A normal little girl enjoying her summer at the lake house. I sat on her bed and looked around the room. Everything was covered in a thin layer of dust. But otherwise it was perfectly preserved. Like a shrine to a child who would never grow up. On the nightstand next to the bed I found a diary. It was a small pink book with a tiny lock. The lock was broken, so I was able to open it. The pages were filled with a child's handwriting. Entries about playing by the lake, swimming with the fish, building sandcastles. But as I read further, I found entries that made me uncomfortable. Daddy came to visit me today. He said he's sorry he had to go away. Daddy told me not to tell Mommy he was here. It's our secret. Daddy and I went swimming together. He taught me how to hold my breath underwater. These entries were dated just days before Rebecca's death. But according to my mother, Rebecca's father had never returned. He had disappeared from their lives when she was 2. I read the final entry, dated the day Rebecca died. Daddy said he wants to take me on a special trip. Just the 2 of us. He said we can be together forever now. I'm so happy. I closed the diary feeling disturbed. Either Rebecca had been imagining her father's visits, or someone had been at the lake house pretending to be her father. Someone who might have been responsible for her death. That evening, I showed the diary to my parents. They read it with growing alarm. "This can't be right," my father said. David never came back. The police investigated Rebecca's death thoroughly. It was ruled an accidental drowning. But my mother looked worried. "What if someone was here?" she said. "What if Rebecca didn't just slip and fall? What if someone lured her into the water?" We spent the evening discussing what to do. My parents wanted to contact the police, but the case was over 40 years old. Most of the evidence would be long gone. And most importantly, there was no proof that the diary entries were real. They could have been the fantasies of a lonely child who missed her father. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Rebecca and what might have happened to her. Around 2 a.m., I heard something that made me sit up in bed. It was the sound of the screen door opening and closing. Someone had just gone outside. I got up and looked out the window. A small figure in a white dress was walking toward the dock. Even in the moonlight, I could see that it was a child. A little girl with long blonde hair. I watched as she sat down on the edge of the dock, her legs dangling in the water. She seemed to be waiting for something, or someone. I quietly left my room and went outside. The night air was cool and still. As I approached the dock, I could see the girl more clearly. She was wearing the same white sundress from the photograph. Her blonde hair hung loose around her shoulders. "Rebecca?" I whispered. The girl turned to look at me. Her face was pale and sad. She looked exactly like the child in the photos, but there was something different about her eyes. They looked older, wiser, like she understood things that no 9-year-old should know. "He said he would come back," she said in a soft, childlike voice. "Daddy promised he would take me with him. But he never came back." I sat down on the dock next to her. Up close, I could see that she was slightly transparent, like looking at someone through frosted glass. "Rebecca," I said gently, "your daddy couldn't come back. He wanted to, but sometimes grown-ups have problems that keep them away. It wasn't your fault." Rebecca looked out over the water. "The man said he was my daddy," she said. "He knew things about me. He knew my favorite color was pink. He knew I liked to swim. He said Mommy had told him all about me." I felt a chill of fear. "What man, Rebecca?" "The man who came to visit," she said. "He said he was my daddy come back to get me. He said we could go on a trip together. He said if I came swimming with him, we could be together forever. So I went with him into the water. But then," Rebecca's voice trailed off. She touched the back of her head gingerly. "Then everything went dark," she said. "And when I woke up, I was still here. But Mommy couldn't see me anymore. And the man was gone." I realized with horror what had happened. Someone had come to the lake house pretending to be Rebecca's father. They had gained her trust by claiming Martha had told them about her. Then they had lured her into the water and killed her. "Rebecca," I said carefully, "can you remember what this man looked like?" She shook her head. "It was getting dark," she said, "and he stayed in the shadows. But he had a nice voice, and he knew so many things about me. I thought he really was my daddy." I put my arm around Rebecca's small shoulders. They felt cold and insubstantial, like mist. "I'm so sorry," I said. "I'm sorry that happened to you. And I'm sorry you've been waiting here all these years." Rebecca leaned against me. "I keep waiting for my real daddy to come," she said. "Mommy used to say he still loved me. She said maybe someday he would come back. So I wait on the dock every night, just in case." I felt tears in my eyes. This poor child had been murdered by a stranger, and then spent 40 years waiting for a father who never knew she was dead. "Rebecca," I said softly, "I think your real daddy is waiting for you somewhere else now. Somewhere better than this dock. Maybe it's time to stop waiting and go find him." Rebecca looked up at me with those wise, sad eyes. "Do you really think so?" she asked. "I really do," I said. "I think he's been waiting for you for a long time. And I think your mommy is there too now. They're both waiting to see you again." Rebecca smiled for the first time since I had met her. A genuine, happy smile like the one in her photographs. "I would like to see Mommy again," she said. "I missed her so much." She stood up from the dock and smoothed down her white dress. "Will you tell people what really happened to me?" she asked. "Will you tell them I didn't just fall?" "I will," I promised. "I'll make sure they know the truth." Rebecca nodded. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing me." She walked to the end of the dock and looked out over the water. The moonlight seemed to grow brighter around her. "I can see them," she whispered. "I can see Mommy and Daddy. They're calling to me." She turned back to me one last time. "Goodbye," she said. "Thank you for helping me remember." Then she stepped forward, not into the water but into the bright moonlight, and she was gone. The dock was empty and the lake was perfectly still. But somehow the whole area felt more peaceful, like a long-held sadness had finally been released. The next morning I told my parents everything. About seeing Rebecca, about her story, about what I believed had really happened. They listened with a mixture of skepticism and concern. But they agreed to contact the police anyway. The detective who reviewed the case was initially dismissive. But when we showed him Rebecca's diary, he became more interested. He said that cases like this were sometimes reopened when new evidence emerged, even after so many years. He promised to look into it. We never found out who had killed Rebecca. Too much time had passed and there were no witnesses. But the case was officially changed from accidental drowning to suspected homicide. Rebecca's story was finally heard. My family decided to sell the lake house. But before we left, I went out on the dock one last time. I carved a message next to Rebecca's initials. Rebecca Martha, found peace at last. I wanted anyone who found it to know that her story had a happy ending, that she had finally found her way home. Sometimes the most heartbreaking stories are about love that transcends death. About children who keep waiting long after everyone else has given up hope. Rebecca taught me that justice matters even decades later, and that sometimes the living have a responsibility to speak for the dead, to make sure their stories are heard and their lives are remembered. The mirror. This is a story that happened to my cousin Sarah, and I still can't look at mirrors the same way it was 3 years ago. Sarah had just moved into her first apartment. She was so excited. It was a small place, but it was hers. The apartment came furnished. There was an old mirror in the bedroom. It was huge. It covered almost the entire wall. The frame was dark wood. It looked ancient. At first Sarah loved it. She would get ready in front of it every morning, but after a few weeks she noticed something strange. When she looked in the mirror late at night, her reflection seemed different just a little bit. Maybe her hair was parted differently, or her smile was slightly off. She thought she was just tired. One night she was brushing her teeth before bed. She glanced at the mirror and froze. Her reflection wasn't copying her movements. Sarah was holding her toothbrush in her right hand, but her reflection was holding it in her left. She blinked hard. When she looked again, everything was normal. She convinced herself she had imagined it. But it kept happening. Little things. At first her reflection would blink when she didn't, or turn its head a second too late. Sarah started avoiding the mirror at night. She would brush her teeth in the kitchen, change clothes in the bathroom, anything to avoid looking at it. Then one evening everything changed. Sarah came home late from work. She was exhausted. Without thinking she walked into her bedroom and looked directly at the mirror. What she saw made her scream. Her reflection was sitting on the bed, but Sarah was standing by the door. The reflection smiled at her. It was her face, but the smile was wrong. Too wide, too many teeth. Sarah ran out of the room. She called me crying. I told her to come stay with me, but she said she was being silly. She went back to her apartment determined to face her fear. That night she covered the mirror with a sheet. She thought that would help. It didn't. Around 2 a.m. she woke up. The room was cold, freezing cold. She could see her breath. The sheet had fallen off the mirror. In the dim light she could see her reflection, but it wasn't in bed. It was standing right next to the mirror, just standing there watching her. Sarah couldn't move. She was paralyzed with fear. Then the reflection stepped forward. It put its hand on the mirror from the inside like it was trying to push through. Sarah saw the glass start to bend, to bubble outward like something was pressing against it. She finally found her voice and screamed. She ran out of the apartment. She never went back. The landlord packed up her things. He said he found the mirror shattered, glass everywhere, but here's the strangest part. He said there was no backing to the mirror. It wasn't a normal mirror at all. It was just a piece of glass with nothing behind it. So what had Sarah been seeing all those nights? What was trying to come through? Sarah stayed with me for months. She was terrified of mirrors, any mirrors. Even now she can barely look at them. She says sometimes out of the corner of her eye she still sees that wrong smile, that thing that looked like her but wasn't. I believed her story because the night she came to my house I saw something too. When she walked past my hallway mirror for just a second, I swear I saw two Sarahs, one walking past and one still standing in the mirror watching me. The basement. When I was 12 years old we moved to an old house in Ohio. It was cheap. My parents were thrilled. I wasn't. The house felt wrong from day one, especially the basement. The basement door was in the kitchen. It was painted white, but the paint was peeling, revealing black wood underneath. The door was always cold, even in summer. My mom would joke about it, said we didn't need air conditioning, just stand by the basement door. I hated that door. Every time I walked past it I felt like something was watching me through the keyhole. My parents said I was being dramatic. They were probably right, but I couldn't shake the feeling. We had been living there for about a month when my dad asked me to get something from the basement. I had never been down there. I always made excuses, but this time I couldn't. He needed a toolbox. It was in the basement. I had to go. I opened the door. The smell hit me first, musty and sweet like rotting fruit. The stairs were wooden. They creaked with every step. There was a single light bulb hanging from a wire. It barely lit anything. I could only see a few feet ahead. The basement was bigger than I expected, much bigger. There were rooms down there, actual rooms with doors. Who builds rooms in a basement? I found the toolbox near the stairs. I grabbed it and turned to leave. That's when I heard it. A sound from one of the rooms, like someone clearing their throat. I froze. We were the only ones home. My mom was at work. My sister was at school. It was just me and Dad was upstairs. I stood there listening. The sound came again, closer this time, like someone was walking through the rooms, getting nearer. I ran. I took the stairs 3 at a time, slammed the door behind me. My dad asked what was wrong. I lied, said I saw a rat. But I started paying attention after that, and I noticed things, sounds from the basement at night, footsteps, doors opening and closing. My parents never heard them, or they pretended not to. Then my sister Emma started sleepwalking. She had never done it before, but suddenly she was getting up at night, walking around the house. My parents found it funny at first until they realized where she was going, always to the basement door, just standing there staring at it, sometimes for hours. One night I followed her. I watched her get out of bed. Her eyes were open but empty. She walked straight to the kitchen, to that door. She put her hand on the doorknob. I grabbed her arm, tried to pull her away. She was strong, stronger than a 9-year-old should be. She opened the door, started walking down the stairs. I had no choice. I followed her. The basement was different at night, darker. The air was thicker, harder to breathe. Emma walked like she knew where she was going, straight to one of those rooms. The door was open, just a crack. She pushed it wider and walked in. I stayed at the doorway, too scared to follow inside. I could see nothing, just black, but I could hear Emma talking to someone, whispering. I couldn't make out the words. Then another voice answered her, deep, old, not human. I ran to her, grabbed her hand, pulled her out of that room. She didn't resist this time. I dragged her up the stairs back to her bed. She never woke up the next morning. She didn't remember anything. I tried to tell my parents. They didn't believe me, said I was scaring my sister, making up stories, but I knew what I heard, and Emma kept sleepwalking every night, always to the basement. We lasted 6 months in that house. What made us leave wasn't the sleepwalking, it was what my dad found when he finally went into those basement rooms. He was cleaning, decided to clear out the junk. He came back up white as a sheet, wouldn't say what he saw, just said we were leaving that day. We packed everything in a hurry. As we drove away, I looked back at the house in the basement window. I swear I saw someone watching us leave, someone tall, too tall, with eyes that reflected the light like an animal's. Years later I asked my dad what he found. He still won't tell me everything, just said there were things down there, old things, photographs, but not normal photographs. They were of our family sleeping, taken from inside our bedrooms, dozens of them, but we had only lived there 6 months. Who took those pictures? Who was living in our basement? Who was Emma talking to all those nights? I don't want to know, but sometimes I dream about it, about that voice in the dark calling my name, asking me to come back. The roadside shrine. My friend Marcus told me this story. It happened when he was driving through Mexico. He was visiting family, driving alone at night, which everyone told him not to do, but Marcus never listened to anyone. The road was empty, no other cars for miles, just him and the darkness. His phone had no signal, the radio only played static. He had been driving for hours, starting to get sleepy. That's when he saw it. A small shrine on the side of the road, covered in flowers and candles. Some of the candles were still lit, flickering in the wind. Marcus had seen many of these. They marked where someone died, usually in a car accident, but this one was different. This one was huge, bigger than any he had seen, and there was someone kneeling in front of it, a woman in a white dress. She wasn't moving, just kneeling there in the middle of the night, miles from anywhere. Marcus slowed down as he passed. He couldn't help but look. The woman turned her head, looked right at him. Her face was wrong. It was too long. Her eyes were just black holes. Her mouth was open, screaming, but no sound came out. Marcus hit the gas, sped away as fast as he could. His hands were shaking. He kept checking the mirrors. Nothing was following him, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. A few miles down the road, his car started making noises. The engine was sputtering, then it died, just stopped completely. Marcus coasted to the side of the road, tried to start it again. Nothing. The battery was dead too. No lights, no phone, just darkness. He sat there for a minute trying to think, then he saw lights in the distance, candles getting closer. The shrine was moving, or something was bringing it. Marcus got out of the car, started running. He could hear footsteps behind him, bare feet on asphalt, and crying. Someone was crying, a woman's voice, begging, pleading, but he couldn't understand the words. He just kept running. Then he saw headlights, a truck coming down the road. Marcus ran into the middle of the road, waving his arms. The truck stopped. The driver was an old man. He took one look at Marcus and told him to get in quickly. As they drove away, Marcus looked back. His car was surrounded by candles, hundreds of them, and standing next to it was the woman in white. She was still screaming, still silent, but now there were others with her, so many others, all in white, all with those black hole eyes. The old man drove in silence for a while, then he asked Marcus, "Did you stop at the shrine?" Marcus said he just slowed down. The old man shook his head. He said that shrine isn't for one person, it's for a bus, a whole bus that crashed there. 40 people died, women and children mostly. They were wearing white, coming from a baptism. He said they appear sometimes looking for someone to join them, someone to complete their number. They need 40 souls, and they only have 39. Marcus asked how he knew this. The old man just smiled sadly, said his daughter was on that bus. They drove the rest of the way in silence. The old man dropped Marcus off in the next town. When Marcus went back for his car the next day with a mechanic, the car was fine, started right up, no problems at all, but the smell, it smelled like funeral flowers and candle wax. Marcus sold the car. He never drove that road again. He says sometimes at night he still hears her, that silent scream, and he wonders what would have happened if he had stopped, really stopped. Would he have been number 40? The neighbor. This happened to me last year. I had just started college, moved into a cheap apartment off campus. It was all I could afford. The building was old, but it was close to school and the rent was reasonable. My neighbor was an old woman, Mrs. Chin. She lived alone in the apartment next to mine. She was friendly enough, always said hello in the hallway. Sometimes she would bring me food, said I was too skinny, needed to eat more. But there was something odd about her. She never left her apartment during the day, only at night. I would hear her door open around 2 or 3 a.m., hear her footsteps in the hallway, then silence. She would come back just before dawn. I figured she worked nights, lots of people do, it wasn't my business, but then I started noticing other things, weird things like how her apartment always smelled like earth, wet earth, like a garden after rain. And the sounds during the day I would hear digging, constant digging, like someone using a shovel, but we were on the 3rd floor, what could she be digging? I tried to ignore it, focused on my studies. Then one day the smell got worse, much worse. It was sweet and rotten like spoiled meat. It was coming through the walls. I couldn't stand it. I knocked on her door, no answer. I knocked again, still nothing. I complained to the landlord. He said he would check on her, but he never did. The smell got so bad I started sleeping at the library, only coming back to shower and change. Other tenants started complaining too. Finally the landlord had to do something. He knocked on her door, no answer. He used his key. The smell that came out, I'll never forget it. The landlord stumbled back, covered his nose, told us all to stay back, then called the police. When the police went in, they found Mrs. Chen. She was alive, sitting in her living room, surrounded by, I don't know how to describe it. The entire apartment was full of dirt, like she had brought soil inside, tons of it, and buried throughout the dirt were things, dead things. Animals, mostly cats, birds, rats, all in different stages of decay. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the holes. She had dug holes in the floor, deep holes that went down into the apartment below and the apartment below that. She had been digging for months, creating a network of tunnels through the building. The police found her journals, pages and pages of writing about how she needed to feed them, the things that lived in the earth, how they spoke to her, told her what they needed. They took her away. She didn't resist, just kept muttering about feeding time, about how they would be angry, how they would come looking for food. The building was condemned. We all had to move out. They said the structure was too damaged. I found a new place across town, tried to forget about it, but a few weeks later I saw on the news the building had collapsed, just fell in on itself. No explanation. The official report blamed the tunnel, said they compromised the foundation. But I know better. I know what really happened. They didn't get fed those things in the earth. They got hungry, and when they get hungry they take what they need, the whole building, everyone who was inside. Sometimes I dream about those holes, dark and deep, going down forever, and I hear sounds from them, scratching, climbing, getting closer. I wake up and check my floor, looking for cracks, for signs of digging, because I know they're still hungry. And I wonder, did Mrs. Chin tell them about me? The train. My grandfather told me this story before he died. He said it happened when he was young, living in a small town where the trains still ran at night, freight trains mostly carrying coal and steel. There was a boy in his town, Timothy, strange kid, always talking about the trains, how they spoke to him, how they told him secrets. Everyone thought he was touched in the head, harmless but odd. Timothy would go to the tracks every night, sit there for hours watching, waiting. Sometimes he would wave at empty air like he saw someone, but no one was ever there. One night my grandfather followed him, curious about what the boy did out there. He hid behind some bushes, watched Timothy sit on the rails. The boy was talking, having a full conversation, but he was alone, completely alone. Then my grandfather heard it, another voice coming from the tracks themselves, metal on metal, but forming words. He couldn't understand them, but Timothy could. The boy was nodding, agreeing with something. A train came that night, not scheduled. The town knew all the train times. This one wasn't supposed to exist. It was old, older than any train should be. Black smoke pouring from it, stacked, no lights, just darkness on wheels. It stopped right in front of Timothy, no screech of brakes, no sound at all, just stopped. The door opened, not a cargo door, a passenger door, but this was a freight train. It shouldn't have passenger cars. Someone stepped out. My grandfather said it looked like a conductor, but wrong. The uniform was from a different time, and the face, he couldn't see the face, just shadow where features should be. The conductor held out his hand to Timothy. The boy took it, climbed aboard. My grandfather wanted to yell to stop him, but he couldn't move, couldn't speak, could only watch as Timothy disappeared into the train. The door closed, the train started moving, silent as death, and then it was gone. Timothy was never seen again. His parents searched, the police searched, everyone searched, but there was no sign of him, no body, no clothes, nothing, just gone, like he never existed. My grandfather kept quiet about what he saw. Who would believe him? But he kept going back to those tracks late at night, watching, and sometimes, just sometimes, he would see that train again, always in the distance, never stopping. Years passed. My grandfather grew up, got married, had children, but he never forgot, and he never stopped checking the tracks. Then one night, 40 years later, he saw Timothy again. Standing by the tracks, hadn't aged a day, still a boy, still wearing the same clothes. My grandfather called out to him. Timothy turned, smiled, but his eyes were empty, black pits like holes in his face. Timothy spoke. His voice was like grinding metal. He said the train needed more passengers, said it was hungry, had been traveling so long, needed souls to keep it running. He asked my grandfather to come to join them, said it was beautiful, eternal. My grandfather ran, never went back to the tracks, moved away from that town, but he said sometimes late at night he could still hear it, that impossible train getting closer, looking for him. Before he died, my grandfather made me promise never to walk on train tracks at night, never to listen if metal speaks, never to look too long at old trains, because some of them aren't really trains at all. There's something else, something that feeds on the lonely, the curious, the ones who listen too closely. I kept that promise until last week when I was walking home late and heard a train whistle from tracks that have been closed for 20 years. I didn't look, just ran, but I heard my name carried on the wind in a voice like grinding metal. The substitute teacher. This happened at my high school 2 years before I graduated. Everyone who was there still talks about it or tries not to. Depends on the person. It started when Mrs. Patterson got sick. Our regular history teacher, she needed surgery, would be out for months. They brought in a substitute, Mr. Vance. He was young, maybe late 20s, handsome in a strange way. All the girls had crushes on him at first, but something was off about him. His smile was too wide, his eyes never blinked. I counted once he went the entire class without blinking. His teaching was strange too. He never used the textbook, just told stories, weird stories about historical events that weren't in any book, battles that never happened, plagues no one had heard of, cities that didn't exist, but he told them like memories, like he had been there. Then students started getting sick, not all at once, one by one, always kids from his class. They would get pale, stop eating, stop talking, just sit in class staring at him like they were waiting for something. The nurse said it was stress, but we knew better. I sat next to Kelly Matthews. She was the first to change. She had been normal on Monday, laughing at lunch, talking about prom. By Wednesday she was different, quiet, cold. Her skin looked gray and she smelled weird, like old books or dust. Thursday she followed Mr. Vance after class. I saw her walking behind him down the hallway, matching his steps exactly like a shadow. I called her name. She didn't turn around, neither did he. They just kept walking to the old part of the school where no one goes. I followed them. I shouldn't have, but I was worried about Kelly. They went to room 13B. It had been closed for years, something about asbestos. Mr. Vance opened the door. They went inside. I crept to the door, listened. I heard voices, many voices, not just Kelly and Mr. Vance, dozens of people, all speaking in unison, reciting something in a language I didn't recognize. It hurt to listen to, made my teeth ache, my nose started bleeding. I peeked through the door crack. The room was full of students, all the sick ones, standing in rows facing Mr. Vance. Their eyes were black, completely black, no whites at all, and they were changing, their faces shifting, becoming something else. Mr. Vance stood at the front, but he wasn't Mr. Vance anymore. He was taller, thinner, his arms too long, fingers like spider legs, and his face, God, his face, it wasn't human. It was a mask of flesh sliding off, revealing something underneath, something that hurt to look at. I ran, went straight to the principal, told him everything. He didn't believe me, said I was being dramatic, but he agreed to check the room. When we got there it was empty, dusty, like no one had been there in years. But Kelly never came home that night, neither did the other sick kids, 8 students total. The police searched everywhere, no trace. Mr. Vance disappeared too. The address he gave the school was fake, the references were fake, everything about him was fake. They found one thing though in his desk, a photo, old, really old, like from the 1920s. It showed a group of students and a teacher. The teacher looked exactly like Mr. Vance, exactly same face, same smile, and behind them, barely visible, was our school. The photo was dated 1923. Our school wasn't built until 1965. No one could explain it. The police filed it away, case closed. Runaways, they said, but I know the truth, and sometimes when I drive past the school at night I see lights in room 13B and shadows moving inside. My little sister goes to that school now. She says they have a new substitute for advanced chemistry. She says he's young, handsome, with a smile that's too wide. I told her to switch classes. She laughed, said I was being paranoid, but yesterday she looked pale and her eyes, for just a second, I swear they flashed black. The attic room. When I was 16 my family inherited a house from my great-aunt Meredith. None of us knew her well. She kept to herself, died alone, left everything to my mother, her only niece. The house was beautiful, 3 stories, Victorian style, but it had been empty for years, needed a lot of work. We spent the summer fixing it up, painting, cleaning, replacing old fixtures. I was in charge of the attic. Big mistake. The attic was accessed through a narrow staircase hidden behind a door in the hallway. The stairs creaked with every step. The air got thicker as you climbed, hotter, even though heat rises. This was different, like the air was alive. The attic itself was huge, running the entire length of the house, full of old furniture covered in sheets, boxes stacked to the ceiling, and dust, so much dust. But in the far corner was a door, small, child-sized, painted black. I tried to open it, locked, no keyhole, just locked from the inside. I told my mom, she said to leave it, probably just storage, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. What locks from the inside? And why was it so small? I worked in the attic for days, sorting through boxes, old photos, letters, junk mostly, but I kept finding things, children's toys, lots of them, too many for one child, and they were all different ages, different decades, like they had been collected over time. Then I found the journals, my great-aunt's journals, dozens of them going back 50 years. Most were normal daily life stuff, but the later ones, they got strange. She wrote about the children in the attic. She said they came at night through the small door, lost children looking for their mothers. She fed them, cared for them, but they always left, went back through the door. She begged them to stay, but they couldn't. They belonged to someone else. The final entries were disturbing. She wrote about making a deal with the woman behind the door. She could keep one child, just one, if she helped collect the others. She agreed, but the woman tricked her. The child she kept wasn't really a child. I stopped reading, went back to the attic to that small door. It was open, just a crack. I know I hadn't opened it. I know it was locked, but there it was, dark inside, darker than it should be. I pushed it open wider, peered inside. It was a room, tiny, maybe 4 feet by 4 feet. The walls were covered in drawings, children's drawings, stick figures, houses, families, but the faces were all scratched out, every single one. In the center of the room was a doll, old porcelain, wearing a faded dress. Its face was perfect, too perfect, like a real child, frozen in ceramic. I reached for it, don't know why, had to touch it. The moment my fingers made contact, I heard her. My great aunt's voice, clear as day. "Don't let her take you too." I jerked back. The doll's eyes opened, not mechanical, they opened like real eyes and looked at me, threw me into me. I scrambled out of the room, slammed the door, it locked itself. I heard crying from inside, a child crying, then laughter, old laughter, older than the house, older than anything should be. I ran downstairs, told my parents we needed to leave now. They thought I was overreacting, but that night we all heard it, footsteps in the attic, small feet running back and forth and singing a nursery rhyme in a language none of us knew. We left the next day, stayed in a hotel while my parents figured out what to do. They decided to sell the house, but every buyer backed out, said it felt wrong. One family made it to closing, moved in, moved out 3 days later, wouldn't say why. The house is still empty, still ours technically. We pay the taxes, keep the lights on, but no one goes there except sometimes I drive by and I see her in the attic window, my great aunt or something, wearing her face, holding that doll, rocking it like a baby. And sometimes there are others with her, small shapes, child-sized, pressed against the glass, looking out, looking for something or someone. And I wonder how many children went through that door. How many didn't come back? And what's waiting in that room for the next curious kid who opens the door? The night market. My college roommate Jean told me this had happened in his hometown in South Korea where his grandmother lived. She always warned him about the night market, said it wasn't for the living. The regular market closed at sunset, vendors packed up, streets emptied, but sometimes if you were out late enough you'd see lights, hear voices, smell food cooking where the market used to be. Jean was skeptical, thought it was just stories, until he saw it himself. He was walking home late from a friend's house, took a shortcut through the market square. It should have been empty, it wasn't. The stalls were there but different, older. The wood was dark, almost black. The lanterns gave off cold light, blue-white like moonlight, but there was no moon that night, just clouds. The vendors were wrong too. They wore traditional clothes but from different eras, all mixed together, and their faces, Jean said their faces kept changing, shifting when he wasn't looking directly at them. One vendor called to him, an old woman selling fruit. The fruit looked perfect, too perfect, no blemishes, no bruises, colors too bright like they were glowing from inside. She offered him an apple free, she said, for a handsome young man. Jean almost took it, his hand was reaching out, then he remembered his grandmother's words, never eat the food, never buy anything, never speak to them, just walk through, eyes down, don't stop. He pulled his hand back, shook his head, kept walking. The woman laughed, her teeth were black, all of them like they'd been painted or rotted, but uniformly black. As he walked deeper into the market it got stranger. One stall sold memories in jars, another sold years of your life wrapped up like candy. A man offered to buy Jin's shadow, said he paid well in currency. Jean wouldn't understand. There were customers too, but they weren't right either. Some were transparent, others had no feet, floating inches off the ground. One woman walked backward everywhere, her head twisted around to see where she was going. Jean kept his head down, walked faster, but the market seemed endless, stretching further than the real market ever did. The voices got louder, overlapping different languages, some not human at all. His grandmother had told him, if you get lost, find the white cat, it knows the way out. He looked around frantically, no cat, just more stalls, more impossible things for sale, bottled screams, pickled dreams, fresh nightmares by the pound. Then he saw it, white fur gleaming in the strange light. The cat was sitting on an empty stall watching him. When he approached it, jumped down, started walking. Jean followed through twisting paths, between stalls that shouldn't exist, past vendors that couldn't be real. Finally he saw the edge where the night market ended and the real world began, but blocking the exit was a man, tall, thin, wearing a mask, a traditional funeral mask. The man spoke, his voice was like wind through bones. He said Jean had to pay the toll, everyone who enters must pay in one form or another. He held out his hand, waiting. Jean had nothing to give, no money, no food, nothing. The man laughed, said there were other currencies, memories, dreams, years of life, pieces of soul. What would Jean trade for his freedom? The white cat rubbed against Jean's leg, purred, and Jean remembered something else. His grandmother had said the cat had already paid his toll generations ago. For all her descendants he was already free. Jean said this to the masked man, who tilted his head, considered, then stepped aside. Jean ran, didn't look back until he was streets away in the normal world with normal lights and normal sounds. When he got home his grandmother was waiting. She knew where he'd been, could smell it on him. The night market leaves a scent sweet and rotten like flowers on a grave. She made him bathe in salt water, burn his clothes, said he was lucky. Jean never took that shortcut again, but sometimes when he's out late he smells that smell, sweet and rotten, and he knows the night market is near opening for business, waiting for customers who don't know the rules. His grandmother is gone now and Jean wonders who pays his toll now. What happens if he accidentally enters again? The white cat is old, might not be there, and the masked man has a good memory, very good, he never forgets a face or a debt unpaid. October, especially not at the old stops, but sometimes kids disappear anyway, always in October, always near dawn, always last seen walking toward the road. My nephew starts school next year, he'll have to take the bus, not Route 47, that number's been retired, but the same roads, the same stops, the same time. I've been teaching him never get on a bus with black windows, never follow the singing, never wave back. But kids forget, kids think they know better, and that bus is patient. It's been collecting for 36 years, 32 original kids, plus Tommy, plus Sarah, plus the ones we don't talk about, the ones that didn't make the news. Sometimes I dream about them, all those kids sitting in rows, frost on their skin, singing that backward song, waiting for what? For enough. How many does a bus hold? When will it be full? And I wonder about Mr. Garrison, is he still driving? After all these years? Following a route that doesn't exist, to a school that isn't there, with children who aren't children anymore. What happened that morning? Where did they go? What took them? The town put up a memorial, 32 names in stone, plus 2 more, soon to be more. We add names every decade like clockwork, like something's keeping schedule, something that needs children one at a time, patient as winter. Last October I was out early, couldn't sleep, saw lights on the old road, heard an engine diesel like a bus. I didn't look, didn't want to see, but I heard the singing closer than ever, and for just a moment I smelled frost in the warm morning air. The last house. I need to tell this story even though no one believes me. It happened just last month. I'm still trying to make sense of it, but I know what I saw, what I experienced in that house at the end of Elm Street. I'm a real estate agent, been doing this for 5 years, shown hundreds of houses, some creepy, some beautiful, but none like this one. 1428 Elm Street, the last house on the dead end. It had been on the market for years, price dropped every month, owner desperate to sell, wouldn't say why, just wanted it gone. I should have known something was wrong, but the commission was too good to pass up. The first time I went alone just to check it out, take photos for the listing. It was a Tuesday afternoon, sunny, normal. The house looked fine from outside, 2 stories, white siding, black shutters, typical suburban home. But the moment I opened the door, everything felt wrong. The air was heavy like before a storm, but inside the house, and cold, so cold I could see my breath in the middle of summer. I did a quick walkthrough, took my photos, tried to ignore the feeling of being watched. Every room was empty, no furniture, no decorations, just walls and floors and windows, but in every room I felt presence. The basement was the worst, didn't even look like a basement. The walls were stone, old stone, older than the house should be, and there were markings carved, deep symbols. I didn't recognize that, hurt to look at. I left quickly, posted the listing that night, figured someone desperate would buy it, fix it up, make it normal. I was so wrong. The first showing was a disaster. Young couple, first-time buyers, excited about the price. We walked through the front door and the woman stopped, grabbed her husband's arm, said she couldn't breathe, the air was wrong. He laughed it off, said she was being dramatic. Then he saw the walls, they were bleeding or sweating, dark liquid seeping from nowhere. We left immediately, they never called back. I went back alone to check the walls, they were dry, normal, no sign of what we'd seen, but I knew we'd all seen it, it wasn't imagination. The next showing was worse, family with 3 kids. The children loved it, at first running through rooms playing hide and seek, then the youngest, maybe 4 years old, started screaming, pointing at empty corners, saying, "The sad people." His mother tried to calm him, but he was hysterical. "They're everywhere," he cried, "in the walls, under the floor, they want out." The other kids started crying too, saying they saw them now, people in the walls reaching out. I suggested we leave, take a break, come back later, but as we walked to the door it slammed shut, locked. I tried my keys, nothing worked, the windows wouldn't open, we were trapped. The house got colder, frost forming on windows. In August the lights flickered, went out in the darkness. We heard them, footsteps above us, dozens of them running, pacing, descending the stairs. The father grabbed a chair, smashed a window, we climbed out, cut and bleeding, ran to our cars. I've never seen a family drive away so fast, left their youngest kid's shoe behind, didn't come back for it. I should have quit then, told the owner to find another agent, but I couldn't, something kept pulling me back, like the house wanted me there, needed me there, so I kept showing it. Each time was stranger, more terrible. One man made it to the 2nd floor, found a room that wasn't on the blueprints, door that opened to a hallway that went on forever. He walked for 10 minutes, same hallway, same doors repeating, had to call me, guide him back by phone. A woman saw her dead mother in the master bedroom, clear as day, young again, warning her to leave, to run, to never come back. Her mother had been dead 20 years, but she knew that voice, that face. An investor brought equipment, EMF readers, temperature gauges, cameras, everything went haywire, captured voices on tape, screaming, begging in languages he couldn't identify. Some sounded ancient, others too new, like they hadn't been spoken yet. But the worst was last week. A developer came, wanted to buy it, tear it down, build condos. We did the walkthrough, everything seemed calm, almost normal. I started to hope. Then we reached the attic, a space I'd never seen, pull-down ladder I'd never noticed. He climbed up first, I followed. The attic was wrong, too big, extended beyond the house, beyond where walls should be, and it wasn't empty. There were people, dozens of them, standing in rows, perfectly still, men, women, children from different times, different eras, all staring at us, all wrong. Their eyes were gone, just smooth skin, but they could see us. The developer backed down the ladder, missed a rung, fell, broke his ankle. I helped him out, called an ambulance. He begged me from the stretcher, burn it down, burn the whole thing down before it takes more. I went back that night, don't know why, had to see the attic again, had to understand the ladder was gone, no access panel, like it never existed, but I could hear them moving above me, so many footsteps. I searched the house, found something in the basement under the stones, a metal box, rusted shut. Inside were papers, deeds going back centuries, but the land was wrong. This house was built in 1952, but the deeds went back to 1641. And the names, the same names repeating every 50 years, same families buying and selling to each other in a circle, like they were keeping something, containing something, passing responsibility generation to generation. The last paper was a letter dated next month, addressed to me in my handwriting, saying I bought the house, saying I live there now, saying I can never leave, but I haven't bought it, I would never buy it. I drove there tonight to check to make sure my car is in the driveway, lights on and every window, shadows moving inside, but I'm here typing this, I'm not there, I can't be there. But I can feel it pulling me, calling me, and I know tomorrow or the next day or next week I'll go back, walk through that door and never leave, because that's what the house does. It collects people, keeps them, uses them. If you see the listing 1428 Elm Street, don't call, don't visit, don't even drive by, let it sit empty, let it rot, because some houses aren't meant to be homes, some houses are meant to be prisons, and the prisoners are still there waiting for company. I can feel myself fading, getting thinner, like I'm being stretched between here and there, between now and then. Soon I'll be in that attic with the others, standing in rows, waiting for the next agent, the next buyer, the next family to join us. The house always wins, the house is patient, the house is hungry, and I'm so very tired of fighting it, of pretending I don't already belong there with the others, in the walls, under the floors, forever. The crows. This is a terrifying story that happened to my aunt's neighbor years ago, and it still haunts me to this day. Back when I was just starting high school, her neighbor Monica was known for her cheerful personality and beautiful long red hair. She lived close to a big old oak tree where crows often made their nests. Every evening when it was time for dinner, Monica would sit by her kitchen window. She enjoyed her meal as the cool autumn breeze drifted in. But one day something changed. A crow landed on the windowsill and just watched her. Its eyes locked onto hers, unmoving. She thought it was hungry, so she started feeding it. And that turned into something she did every day. At first it seemed harmless, but one evening things took a strange turn. Monica had just come home from work. The weather was so humid that she left her hair damp and hanging loose down her back. There were only 5 people in the house that night. Monica, her sister, her brother-in-law, and their 2 children. Her husband was away on business. That night she ate dinner, but her hunger was insatiable. It was like she hadn't eaten in weeks. The next day she was bedridden with a burning fever. And when it finally broke, things got worse. Monica began eating massive amounts of food. Enough for 10 people. And at night, that's when the real horror began. She started wandering the house, opening cabinets, smashing plates, moving furniture, banging on doors. It was as if she wasn't herself anymore. The doctors called it stress, but her family knew better. Then one day my aunt went to check on her. What she saw was burned into her memory. 6 or 7 people were inside Monica's living room, desperately trying to restrain her. She was fighting with such force they could barely manage. That was the last time my aunt dared to visit. Eventually, Monica was brought to a priest. He placed his hands on her shoulders and began praying. As he did, a deep guttural voice erupted from her mouth. He asked, "How many of you are in there?" And that voice replied, "9. There are 9 of us inside her." The priest was horrified. "Why did you enter her?" The voice answered, "She cared for us. She fed us. We're taking her to the underworld." That's when he realized the truth. The crows weren't just birds. They were spirits. And when she laughed, when her long wet hair hung down her back, that's when they took their chance. The spirits warned the priest. Monica would never have peace, never live normally. And if she tried, tragedy would follow. The priest threatened them. He prayed with power. And in time they left. Before Monica went home, he gave her a protective pendant and warned her. "Never lose this. Never take it off," he said. Years passed. Monica got married in 2016. She became pregnant but lost the baby. Again in 2019. And once more in 2021. Every time a miscarriage. In the end they gave up trying. But even now they do not live in peace. I sincerely hope nothing more happens to Monica. But some things they never let go. Hide and seek. This story might not be the scariest you've ever heard, but even now it still gives me chills. It happened when I was just in first grade. My school was a 3-story building, and on this particular day this happened during lunch break. My friends and I had just finished eating our sandwiches from home. We ran out to play in the courtyard, but after a while we got bored and decided to play hide and seek. It was the last round of the game. One of my friends suggested we go up the right side stairs of the building to hide. But once we got there, everyone got scared. They said it was too dark. But I wasn't scared, so I decided to go up alone. I made my way up the stairs. At the top there was just one door. As the seeker started counting down, 10, 9, 8. I turned the door knob, opened the door inward, and stepped inside. The room was dusty, like it hadn't been touched in years. Desks were scattered and tipped over, and cobwebs hung in the corners. I sat down in a spot near the door, crouched low, and scanned the room. That's when I noticed it. Red stains on the walls. Dripping. It smelled awful, like something rotting under layers of dust. There was a blackboard at the front of the room, and on it were smudged handprints, streaking down. It should have been a red flag, but at the time I thought it was just old paint, so I stayed. A few minutes passed. It was quiet, almost too quiet. Then I heard it. A noise from the storage room. A thump, a shift, a rustle. I froze in fear, but I was just a kid. I didn't want to find out what it was, so I just ran out of the room and found my friends. I was happy I'd won the game. They hadn't found me, and soon lunch break was over. Back in class, one of my friends leaned over and asked me where I had been hiding. She said they had been calling my name over and over, but I never answered. I told her I was hiding upstairs in that room on the right side of the building. She looked at me like I was crazy. Then she said something that haunted me for a very long time. She said, "That room's been sealed for years. Apparently the door was boarded up a long time ago, and no one ever opened it. Everyone who tried that door said it was always blocked. So how did I open it? How did I walk right in without any effort? And those noises in the storage room? What was inside that room with me? And the handprints? Looking back now, they didn't look like paint. They looked like blood. The witch. Hi, I'm Maya. I'm 18 now, but I was 16 when this happened. We had just moved to Bedtime, an island in the Philippines known for its witches and strange, unsettling happenings. My dad had warned me about its reputation, but nothing could have prepared me for what I experienced. When we arrived, there were only 6 other houses nearby, scattered along a dusty road. We settled in quickly. A few months passed without incident, until one night I noticed something very strange. One of our neighbor's dogs was sitting perfectly still in the middle of the road, staring into the darkness to the left. It was past midnight, and he looked like he was waiting for something, or someone. Every now and then he would bark into the night, a low, fearful bark. I looked around, expecting to see someone walking down the road, but there was no one. I checked on my own dog too, curious if he sensed anything unusual, but he was sound asleep, curled up peacefully. Eventually, I brushed it off and went back to bed. A few days went by with nothing, but then one night it felt like everything changed. I was up late watching YouTube videos in my room, around 2 or 3 a.m. when I heard a loud scream, a distant, desperate cry for help. At first, I thought it was just a neighbor having a nightmare, but as I sat on my bed, glued to the screen, I felt it, someone walking outside the house. When I looked toward the window, I noticed the motion sensor light outside kept flickering on and off, but no one was there. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe it was just the wind or a cat passing by the sensor, but deep down I felt that something was wrong. Then I heard the voice again, closer this time. It was low, almost a whisper. Impossible to tell if it belonged to a man or a woman. Panic crept into my chest. My dog, who had been silent, suddenly began barking. Soft at first, almost confused, like he didn't understand why he was the only one reacting. None of the other dogs in the neighborhood made a sound. Terrified, I grabbed my phone and used the flashlight to check on my parents and brother. They were fast asleep in their rooms. I thought about waking my dad up, but I knew he would dismiss it and tell me to go back to bed. Instead, I checked the front door to see if my dog was okay. He looked different, stiff, his tail low, ears pinned back, staring into the empty road. I followed his gaze. The road was deserted. There was only a single street light, barely illuminating the dense darkness beyond. All the neighbors' houses were pitch black. No lights on, no sounds, I was the only one awake, the only one hearing that chilling call for help. I barely slept that night, lying frozen in bed until morning. When the sun finally rose, I realized I must have dozed off at some point. I rushed to find my mom and told her everything. As I finished my story, her face paled. She told me that her cousin had called earlier that morning with devastating news. One of my mom's childhood friends had passed away that night from a sudden stroke. The same night I heard the voice calling for help. My mom believed it was her friend's spirit, lost, confused, still clinging to life, and that the cries I heard were her soul pleading for help, unable to accept what had happened. Since that night, nothing like that has ever happened again. But I still wonder, what was it that I actually heard that night? The housekeeper. Growing up in India, we moved around a lot because of my mother's job. At one point, we settled into a new house. A small place with only 3 rooms and a tiny balcony at the back. The balcony connected directly to the alley, so anyone walking by could easily access it. Soon after moving in, we hired a housekeeper. At first, everything seemed normal. But after a while, she started acting very strange. One day, my father went into the kitchen to grab something, and caught the housekeeper doing something odd near the stove. When my father asked her what she was doing, she quickly said she was cleaning. But my father was sure that she wasn't. There was something off about her posture, something he couldn't explain. Not long after that, we discovered a creepy symbol on the balcony floor. It showed 5 black figures, 2 large ones and 3 smaller ones. Clearly, it represented our family. My parents, my 2 brothers, and me. My father, furious and alarmed, grabbed a mop and washed the strange symbol away. But almost immediately after that, random injuries and accidents started happening to us. Both my parents got food poisoning. My older brother fell down the stairs and sprained his ankle. My younger brother cut his hand on broken glass. And I got a severe allergic reaction out of nowhere. We began to grow very suspicious of our housekeeper. We were convinced that she was somehow involved. My parents decided to fire her and send her away. But the story doesn't end there. One night, as I was lying in bed, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A woman with a long braid that looked exactly like the housekeeper's hair poked her head out from the hallway near the bathroom, and just stared at me. I was so terrified that I pulled the covers over my head. I didn't move until morning. A few days later, we found out that the housekeeper's daughter had been in an accident. She broke her arm. And her son? He was constantly falling sick after she left our home. We wasted no time. We moved out of that horrible house as quickly as we could. After we left, things definitely got better. But even today, I wonder, what exactly did the housekeeper do? The forest path. This happened to my cousin David when he was in college. He was attending university in a small mountain town. The campus was surrounded by dense forest. Most students stayed on the main paths, but David liked to explore. One evening, he discovered a narrow trail behind the library. It looked old, barely visible through the undergrowth. Curious, he decided to follow it. The path wound deeper into the forest. The trees grew thicker, blocking out most of the dying sunlight. After walking for about 15 minutes, he came across something strange. A small clearing with a circle of stones. In the center was a wooden post, old and weathered, with names carved into it. Dozens of names. Some looked recent. Others were so old he could barely read them. David took out his phone to take a picture, but it was dead, which was odd. He had charged it that morning. As he examined the post more closely, he noticed something else. Fresh flowers at the base. Someone had been here recently. The sun was setting fast. He decided to head back. But when he turned around, the path was gone. Not overgrown. Not hidden. Gone. Just trees where the trail had been. He tried to retrace his steps, but every direction looked the same. Dense forest. No landmarks. No path. The clearing with the post was still there, but everything else had changed. Panic started to set in. He was lost. Completely lost. And it was getting dark. That's when he heard the singing. Soft at first. A woman's voice, coming from somewhere in the trees. The song was beautiful but sad. In a language he didn't recognize. He called out, "Hello? Can you help me?" The singing stopped, then started again. Closer. David followed the voice. What else could he do? He pushed through the undergrowth, branches catching his clothes, scratching his face. The singing led him to another clearing. This one had a small pond. The water was black in the fading light. and standing at the edge was a woman. She wore a long white dress. Her back was to him. Her hair was wet, hanging down to her waist. "Excuse me," David said. "I'm lost. Can you help me find the path?" The woman didn't turn around, but she stopped singing. The forest went completely silent. No birds, no insects, nothing. Then she spoke. Her voice was different from the singing. "Rough. You found the memorial." David's mouth went dry. The wooden post?" She nodded slowly. "Those are the ones who got lost. The ones who never left." David took a step back. "I need to get back to campus." The woman laughed. It wasn't a pleasant sound. The forest decides who leaves and who stays. She finally turned around. David wished she hadn't. Her face was young, beautiful even, but her eyes were wrong. Completely white. No pupils, no irises, just white. And her dress, what he thought was white fabric, was moss, growing on her skin. She smiled. Her teeth were sharp. Too many of them. You can try to run. They all do. But the trees will bring you back. They always do. David ran. He crashed through the forest. Branches tearing at him. Roots trying to trip him. And behind him, that horrible laughter. Getting closer. He ran until his lungs burned. Until his legs gave out. He collapsed against a tree, gasping for breath. The laughter had stopped, but he could feel eyes watching him. From every direction. That's when he noticed the tree he was leaning against. It had a face, carved into the bark. A human face, twisted in terror. He scrambled away, looked at the other trees. They all had faces, different faces, all screaming silently. The woman appeared again, not walking, just there, standing a few feet away. The forest is hungry. It feeds on the lost. You read the names. Soon yours will join them. David closed his eyes, started praying. To anyone, anything, that would listen. When he opened them, he was on the main campus path. Students walking by gave him strange looks. He was covered in scratches, his clothes torn, but he was back. He checked his phone. It was working again. 3 hours had passed, but it felt like minutes. David never spoke about what happened, not to anyone, but he never went near that trail again. And sometimes on quiet nights he could hear it, that sad, beautiful singing, coming from the forest, calling him back. The next semester, a freshman went missing. They found her phone near the library, by a narrow trail that led into the forest. They never found her, but David knew. Her name would be on that post now, carved fresh, while she became another face in the trees, another voice in the singing, waiting for the next curious student to wander off the path. The night shift. My sister Rachel worked at a 24-hour gas station during college. She needed the money, and the night shift paid extra. It was located on a lonely stretch of highway, miles from town, the kind of place truckers stopped for coffee, and travelers used the restroom. Rachel didn't mind the solitude. She could study between customers. The owner, Mr. Petrov, was a kind old man. He trained her himself, showed her how to work the register, how to lock up properly, and gave her one strange rule. If anyone comes in after 3 a.m. asking for room 7, tell them it's occupied. Rachel thought it was odd. The gas station didn't have rooms. It wasn't a motel. But Mr. Petrov was serious. Just tell them it's occupied. Don't ask questions. For the first few weeks, nothing unusual happened. Truckers came and went, bought coffee and snacks, used the facilities, normal stuff. Then one night things changed. It was around 3:15 a.m. A car pulled up, an old sedan, the kind you don't see anymore. A man got out. He was tall, thin, wearing a suit that looked decades out of style. He walked into the store. The fluorescent lights flickered when he entered. Rachel looked up from her textbook. "Can I help you?" The man smiled. His teeth were too white, like they were painted. "I need room 7. Rachel's heart skipped, but she remembered Mr. Petrov's rule. "I'm sorry, it's occupied." The man's smile faded. "Are you sure?" "Yes, sir. Occupied." He stared at her for a long moment. His eyes were pale gray, almost colorless. Then he nodded. "I'll wait." He walked to the back of the store and stood there, not browsing, not moving, just standing. facing the wall. Rachel tried to go back to studying, but she could feel him there. After an hour, he walked back to the counter. Is room 7 available now? No, sir. Still occupied. His jaw tightened. I'll wait. This went on all night. Every hour he would ask. Every hour she would say no. He never bought anything. Never used the restroom. Just waited. At 5:55 a.m., just before sunrise, he asked one last time. Room 7? Occupied. He leaned across the counter. His breath smelled like earth, like dirt. Tell whoever's in there. Their time is almost up. Then he left, got in his car, and drove away. Rachel was shaking. When Mr. Petrov arrived at 6 a.m., she told him everything. His face went white. Did you let him in? No. I said it was occupied just like you told me. He relaxed slightly. Good girl. Good. What's room 7? Rachel asked. Mr. Petrov was quiet for a moment. Then he said, this station was built on old land. Bad land. There used to be a motel here. Room 7 was where things happened. What kind of things? The kind that leave marks. The kind that attract visitors. Rachel didn't understand, but she was too tired to ask more questions. The next night she was nervous, but the man didn't come back. Weeks passed. She started to relax, forgot about the strange encounter. Then, exactly 1 month later, he returned. Same time, same car, same routine. I need room 7. It's occupied. But this time he wasn't alone. There were others in his car. She could see their silhouettes. 3, maybe 4 people, all sitting perfectly still. The man smiled that too-white smile. We'll all wait. They filed into the store, one by one, each one stranger than the last. A woman in a wedding dress, yellowed with age. A teenager in a Letterman jacket, from a school that closed in the 70s. An old man in a hospital gown, barefoot. They all stood at the back of the store, facing the wall, not moving, not speaking, just waiting. Every hour the man in the suit would ask, room 7? Occupied. More people arrived as the night went on. The store filled with them, all different ages, different eras, all waiting for room 7. Rachel was terrified, but she kept saying no, kept telling them it was occupied. As dawn approached, they began to leave, one by one, filing out silently. The man in the suit was last. He stopped at the counter. One day room 7 will be empty, and when it is, we'll all check in. After they left, Rachel quit. She couldn't take it anymore. Mr. Petrov understood. He gave her a month's extra pay, and a warning. Never stop at old gas stations after 3 a.m. Some of them remember what they used to be, and who used to stay there. Rachel found a day job. Normal hours, normal customers. But sometimes when she drives at night, she sees them. Cars pulled over at abandoned stations. People standing outside, waiting, always waiting, for room 7 to be empty. The school project. This happened during my senior year of high school. Our history teacher, Ms. Williams, assigned us a project. Research the history of our houses. Find out who lived there before. What stories the walls might hold. Most kids did basic research. Previous owners. When it was built. Boring stuff. But I got obsessed. Our house was old. Built in 1924. I went to the library. Searched through old newspapers. City records. Census data. What I found was disturbing. In 1952, a family of 5 lived in our house. The Hendersons, parents and 3 children, ages 8, 10, and 13. One morning, neighbors noticed they hadn't seen the family in days. Mail was piling up. Milk bottles on the porch. Police were called. They found the house empty. Beds made. Breakfast on the table. Half eaten. Still fresh. But the family was gone. No signs of struggle. No notes. They just vanished. Police searched for months. Nothing. The case went cold. But that wasn't the strangest part. I found 3 more disappearances, all from our house. 1967, the Chin family. Parents and 1 child. Gone overnight. 1983, Sarah Morrison. Single mother with twin boys. Vanished. 1999, the Kowalskis. Elderly couple. Disappeared. Always the same pattern. Normal evening. Gone by morning. No trace. I showed my research to my parents. They laughed it off, said people move suddenly sometimes. But I knew better. There was a pattern. Every 15 to 16 years, someone disappeared from our house. We had been living there for 14 years. I started paying attention to things I'd ignored before. The cold spot in the hallway, the way shadows moved wrong in the corner of my room, the whispers in the walls at night. I set up a camera in my room, started recording while I slept. For a week, nothing. Then I saw it. 3:33 a.m. My door opened. No one there. Just opened. Stayed open for exactly 1 minute. Then closed. The next night, same thing. 3:33 a.m. Door opens. But this time I saw something else. A shadow. Moving across my room. To my bed. Standing over me. Watching. I showed my parents the footage. They said it was just shadows from outside. But I knew. Something was in our house. Something that took people. And we were running out of time. I researched more. Found a connection. All the disappearances happened in October. It was September. I tried to convince my parents to leave. Take a vacation. Stay with relatives. Anything. They refused. Said I was being paranoid. October came. I couldn't sleep. Every night I waited. Watching. Listening. October 15th. The anniversary of the Henderson disappearance. I stayed awake all night. Nothing happened. My parents said, "See? Just coincidence." But I noticed something. My little brother had changed. He was quiet, stared at walls, whispered to himself. When I asked what he was saying, he just smiled. "They're coming soon." Who's coming? The collectors. That night I stayed in his room, watched him sleep. At 3:33 a.m. his eyes opened, but he wasn't awake. He sat up, got out of bed, walked to the closet, opened it, and stepped inside. I followed. The closet was empty, but he kept walking, through the wall, like it wasn't there. I grabbed his arm, tried to pull him back. That's when I saw it. The wall wasn't solid. It was like water, rippling. And beyond it, a long hallway. Impossible. Our closet backed up to the outside wall. There couldn't be a hallway, but there it was. And walking down it were people, families, all the missing families, the Hendersons, the Chents, Sarah Morrison and her boys, the Kalskis, all walking, silent, eyes vacant. My brother tried to join them. I held on tight, pulled with all my strength. The hallway began to fade. The wall solidified. My brother collapsed. When he woke, he didn't remember anything, but I did. I knew what happened to all those families. They didn't disappear. They were collected, taken somewhere else, through the walls. We moved out the next week. I convinced my parents, told them about asbestos, fake inspection reports, anything to get us out. The house is still there. New family moved in last year. The Johnsons, parents and 2 kids. They've been there 11 months now. I want to warn them. But what would I say? Your house collects people? Watch the walls? Don't let your children near the closets at 3:33 a.m.? They'd think I'm crazy. So I wait and watch the news, hoping I don't see their names, hoping they're smarter than we were, hoping they leave before October comes again. The midnight train. Let me tell you about something that happened in my hometown. Everyone knows about it, but nobody talks about it, especially not the older folks. They remember. Our town had a train station once, closed in 1978. Tracks were torn up, station demolished, shopping mall built over it. But sometimes you can still hear the trains. My friend Alex heard them first. He lived near the mall. Said he woke up one night to the sound of a train whistle, clear as day. But there were no tracks, no trains, not for decades. He thought he was dreaming, until it happened again, and again. Always at the same time, 12:47 a.m., the exact time the last train left the station. Back in 1978, Alex became obsessed, started researching, found old newspaper articles about the last night of service. October 31st, 1978, Halloween. The midnight train to Chicago, full of passengers, never arrived, never found, just vanished, somewhere between here and the next town. 47 people, gone. The investigation found nothing. No wreckage, no bodies. The train simply disappeared, like it drove off the earth. The railway shut down after that. Too many questions. Too much fear. But Alex discovered something else. Every Halloween people reported strange things. Sounds of a train. Ghostly figures at the old platform. And sometimes people vanished. Always near midnight. Always near where the station used to be. Alex wanted to investigate. Halloween was coming. He asked me to come with him. I said no. But he went anyway. He set up cameras in the mall parking lot. Right where the old platform used to be. Waited. At 12:47 a.m. he texted me. I can hear it. Then nothing. I called him. No answer. I drove to the mall. His car was there. Cameras still running. But Alex was gone. I checked the footage. At 12:47 the camera started to static. Through the interference I could see shapes. A train. Translucent. Flickering. Like a projection. But solid enough. And Alex walked toward it. The doors opened. He stepped inside. The train faded. The static cleared. And Alex was gone. That was 5 years ago. Every Halloween I go to that spot. I wait. Hope to see the train. Hope to see Alex. But I only hear it. That whistle. Lonely and distant. I researched the passengers from 1978. Found their families. Many had similar stories. Loved ones who went looking. Who heard the train. Who disappeared. The numbers don't make sense. 47 people vanished in 1978. But over the years, more than 200 have gone missing. All connected to that spot. All on Halloween. All around midnight. Where do they go? Are they on that train? Riding forever? Never reaching Chicago? I've tried to warn people. Put up signs every October. Stay away from the mall at midnight. They get taken down. Bad for business, they say. But I know the truth. That train is still running. Still making stops. Still collecting passengers. And it's never full. Last year I saw something new. A figure in the mall security footage. Walking through the parking lot. Looked like Alex. But older. Much older. Like decades had passed. He was wearing a conductor's uniform. He looked at the camera. Smiled. And then faded away. I think I understand now. The train needs a crew. Engineers. Conductors. Porters. It recruits them. From the curious. The investigators. The ones who come looking. This Halloween I won't go. I'll stay home. Lock my doors. Ignore the whistle. Because I know. If I see that train again. If those doors open. I'll step inside. Just like Alex. Just like all the others. And I'll never come back. Or worse. I'll come back changed. In a uniform. Looking for new passengers. For a train that never stops running. Never reaches its destination. Never lets anyone go. The midnight train to nowhere. Still right on time. Every Halloween. 12:47 a.m. All aboard. The old cemetery. Behind our town's library is an old cemetery. Colonial era. Headstones so weathered you can barely read them. Most people avoid it. Say it feels wrong. They're right. When I was in middle school, my friends and I went there on a dare. Tommy Morrison said he'd give us $20 each. If we spend an hour there after dark. Easy money, we thought. There were 4 of us. Me, Sarah, Jake, and Miguel. We met at the cemetery gates at 9 p.m. Full moon. Perfect for exploring. The gate was rusted. Squealed when we pushed it open. The sound echoed. Too loud. Like the cemetery amplified it. We walked among the headstones. Reading names and dates. People who died centuries ago. Before America was even a country. Some headstones had strange symbols. Not crosses. Something else. Shapes that hurt to look at. Sarah found a section with small headstones. Children. Dozens of them. All died in 1692. Same month. Plague? Jake suggested. But the dates were too spread out. 1 or 2 each day. For weeks. That wasn't how plagues worked. We kept exploring. Found a crypt built into a hill. Iron door. Rusty but solid. With a padlock. But the padlock was on the inside. How does that work? Miguel asked. Keeps things in, not out, I said. I was joking. But nobody laughed. We'd been there about 30 minutes. Halfway done. The money seemed less important now. But we were too proud to leave. That's when we heard it. Singing. Coming from deeper in the cemetery. A child's voice. Sweet. Innocent. But wrong. The words were backwards. or in a language that predated words. Sarah grabbed my arm. We should go. But Jake was already walking toward the sound. It's just someone messing with us, he said. We followed. Had to stay together. The singing led us to the oldest part of the cemetery. Headstones here were different, rougher. Some just unmarked rocks. And in the center, a little girl, maybe 7 years old, wearing a white nightgown, barefoot. She sat on a gravestone, swinging her legs, singing. When she saw us, she smiled. You came to play. Her voice was wrong, like multiple people speaking. Different ages, different accents, all through one small mouth. We're just passing through, I said. She tilted her head. Nobody passes through. Everyone stays. Like my friends. She gestured around her. The graveyard was empty, but suddenly, it wasn't. Shapes formed from mist. Children, dozens of them, all in white nightgowns, all smiling. Oh, wrong. We play every night, the girl said. Hide and seek is our favorite. Wanna play? We need to go, Sarah said. The girl's smile faded. But you just got here. And visiting hours aren't over. The children moved closer, surrounding us. Their feet didn't touch the ground. They glided, like smoke. Count to 10, the girl said. Then find us. If you win, you can leave. If we win. She didn't finish, just smiled wider, too wide. What if we don't play? Jake asked. The children laughed. It sounded like breaking glass. Everyone plays, one way or another. We looked at each other. No choice. Fine, I said. We'll play. The girl clapped. Close your eyes. Count to 10. No peeking. We closed our eyes, started counting. 1, 2, 3. I heard movement. Whispers, giggling. 7, 8, 9. The air got cold, so cold it hurt to breathe. 10. We opened our eyes. The cemetery was empty again, but different. The headstones had moved, formed a maze, paths that hadn't been there before. And somewhere in that maze, those things were hiding. Split up or stay together? Miguel asked. Together, Sarah said immediately. We entered the maze. The paths were narrow. Headstones towered over us. Names and dates blurred. Unreadable. We found the first one quickly. A boy. Hidden behind a gravestone. He giggled when we spotted him. Then dissolved into mist. One down, Jake said. But his voice shook. We kept searching. Found more. Each time they'd laugh and vanish. But something was wrong. The cemetery was getting bigger. The paths longer. And we couldn't find the exit. How many have we found? Sarah asked. I tried to count, but couldn't remember. The number kept changing in my head. I don't know. That's when we realized we were lost. The maze had no end, no exit. It just kept going. And the children, they weren't hiding anymore. They were following us, getting closer, their whispers louder. Almost time, almost midnight, almost hours. I checked my phone. 11:58 p.m. 2 minutes. Run, I shouted. We ran. Through paths that shifted. Past headstones that moved. The children chased us. Not running, gliding. Always just behind. Then I saw it. The gate. Still open. There. I pointed. We sprinted. The children screamed. Not like children. Like animals. Like wind. Like nothing human. We burst through the gate. Fell onto the sidewalk. Gasping. Shaking. I looked back. The cemetery was normal again. Just old headstones. No maze. No children. But the little girl stood at the gate, watching us. You didn't finish the game, she said. You have to come back. Everyone comes back. We ran. Didn't stop until we reached Jake's house. Told ourselves it was mass hysteria. Shared delusion. Anything but real. But then things started happening. Sarah began sleepwalking. Always toward the cemetery. Her parents had to lock her in at night. Miguel heard children singing outside his window. Every night. Getting louder. Jake saw them in mirrors. Standing behind him. Reaching out. And me? I dream about that place. Every night. The maze. The children. The game we didn't finish. And I know. One day I'll go back. We all will. Because she was right. Everyone comes back. The game isn't over. It never ends. Not until someone wins. And in 300 years, no one has won. Sarah disappeared last month. Her parents found her bed empty, window open, footprints leading toward the cemetery. They searched, found nothing. But I know where she is, playing hide and seek. Forever. Miguel is next. He stopped fighting it. Says the singing is beautiful now. Says the children just want friends. Jake won't leave his house. Covers all his mirrors. But it won't help. They're patient. They've been waiting since 1692. They can wait longer. And me? I'm writing this down, so someone knows what happened when I disappear. Because I will. Tonight, maybe. Tomorrow. So I can feel them calling. And part of me wants to answer. To finish the game. To see how it ends. Even though I know. I've always known. In games like this, the living never win. The final warning. If you've read all these stories, you might think they're just fiction. Made up to scare you. I wish that were true. But every single one happened. Every family torn apart. Every person who vanished. Every warning ignored. They're all real. And they're all connected. The crows that possess. The rooms that shouldn't open. The spirits that call for help. The housekeepers who curse. The forests that hunger. The night shifts that never end. The houses that collect. The trains that run forever. The cemeteries that play games. They're all part of something bigger. Something old. Something that feeds on curiosity. On disbelief. On people who say, that can't be real. Right before they disappear. I've spent years collecting these stories. Talking to survivors. Visiting the places. And I've learned one thing. The darkness is always there. Waiting. Just outside your vision. Just beyond your door. Just under your bed. It has rules. Patterns. Ways to stay safe. Don't feed the crows. Don't enter rooms that shouldn't exist. Don't answer voices in the night. Don't trust those who draw symbols. Don't leave the path. Don't work alone after 3 a.m. Don't research your house too deeply. Don't wait for phantom trains. Don't play games with the dead. But most importantly, don't think you're safe, because you're not. None of us are. The woman in white is still looking for souls. The basement still has rooms that shouldn't exist. The night market still opens for business. The housekeeper found a new family. The forest path still appears to students. The gas station still has a room 7. The houses still collect people every 16 years. The midnight train still runs on Halloween. The cemetery children still want playmates. And somewhere, right now, someone is reading this, thinking it's just a story, planning to test it, to prove it wrong, to show they're not afraid. Don't. Please don't. Because once you start looking, once you start noticing, once you invite them in, they never leave. They follow you home. They wait in your walls. They whisper your name. They count down the days, until you're ready, until you're alone, until you're theirs. I've told you everything I know, given you all the warnings. The rest is up to you. Stay in the light. Lock your doors. Trust your instincts. And whatever you do, don't look behind you right now. They don't like being seen. Not until they're ready. Not until it's too late. Sweet dreams.